All right, I think we're live. Please push one in the chat if you can hear me. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 520. Black Geopolitics Talk. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit the notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. Coming those posts on the community tab. There will be a docket in the description beneath the video in a few seconds. Just give me a couple of seconds to get this together, and then we'll get started. If you want to join the panel and engage in this discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Before you click on the link, make sure you update your Zoom client because there is a new update out. Let me give a shout out to the people in the chat who showed up first. Jay Green, PCU, Mike Rizzi, PCU, Zero, what it do? Bello Gino, PCU, Black Scorpion, peace. Mega Montana, peace. All right, just give me a few seconds. Let me post the docket now. All right, let's get started, man. Sorry for the delay. The docket was not arranged correctly, so we're gonna go into it now. This item on the docket was from AsiaTimes.com. Why the U.S. withdrew its bombers from Guam. The last time they withdrew their naval and air assets was World War II. In one awkward and still unexplained step, the Pentagon is unnerving allies and friends while potentially harming the U.S. forward deterrent in the Pacific, especially as it applies to China. The unexplained step was the mid-April withdrawal of strategic bombers from Guam. While Guam is far from the troubled Taiwan Straits, Okinawa in Japan, and even farther from the South China Sea, it is light years closer than flying combat aircraft from the middle of the U.S. Adding a dozen or more hours to the Pentagon's ability to respond to an active threat seems hard to justify. Make sure I turn my volume up. I don't think anybody can hear me. U.S. Air Force bombers, including the B-1 Lancer, the B-52 Stratofortress, and the B-2 Spirit, have been operating in Guam since 2004 under the so-called Continuous Bomber Presence Program. The official statement on the pullback of the bomber fleet from Guam has led to a lot of head scratching. In line with the National Defense Strategy, the United States has transitioned to an approach that enables strategic bombers to operate forward in the Indo-Pacific region from a broader array of overseas locations when required and with greater operational resilience. While these bombers are permanently based in the United States, the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command said in a statement. There are different ways to understand the official statement, although on its face value, it is illogical. Why would the U.S. pull back from the bases that have served it effectively for years, only to redeploy them so they can operate forward from any array of overseas locations? And why pull them all the way back to Minoy Air Force Base in North Dakota and not to nearer by Alaska or Hawaii? One theory is that the U.S. base on Guam, which includes Andersen Air Force Base, is vulnerable to missile or bomb attacks from China. If true, will the U.S. also pull back from Naval Base Guam, the other major base on the island? And what about the U.S. bases on Okinawa, Japan, and Korea? Are these bases also vulnerable? The short answer is that the buildup of China's military, expansion of its Navy deployment of new strategic bombers, submarines, surface combatants, and 2 aircraft carriers is shifting the region's balance of power. But wouldn't the logical response to be strengthening the U.S. military posture in East Asia instead of yanking bombers back to the U.S.? Part of the U.S. Air Force's concern is China's DF-26 missile, sometimes referred to as the Guam Killer. The DF-26 is said to be capable of hitting targets up to 5,471 kilometers away with nuclear or conventional warheads. If the DF-26 is the real threat, then the next step should be closing Naval Base Guam, where the COVID-19 afflicted U.S. aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt is now berthed. No such plan has been put forward, at least not yet. Instead, there is a semi-secret Pentagon plan to reshape the Navy by trimming the U.S. aircraft carrier fleet by 2, reducing the current 11 carriers to 9. The remaining 9 carriers may still sound like a lot, but carriers are hugely difficult to maintain. At any given time, 4 or 5 carriers are undergoing major maintenance that can keep them out of service for 1 or 2 years. Given strategic responsibilities in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, Persian Gulf, and Pacific, and the fact that carriers operate with task forces usually called carrier strike groups and include surface ships and submarines to protect them, talking to carriers taking two carriers out of service also creates a significant redundancy for the other task force vessels. A carrier strike group consists of a guided missile cruiser for air defense, two LAMPs, light airborne multi-purpose ships that carry anti-submarine warfare helicopters, warships, and two LAMPs warships, and one or two anti-submarine destroyers. The strike group is also supported by an undeclared number of nuclear attack submarines. A variant of the carrier strike group is an expeditionary strike group that consists of an aircraft carrier and an amphibious assault ship, a dock landing ship, LSD, an amphibious transport dock, a marine expeditionary unit, AV-8B Harrier II, or more recently Lockheed Martin F-35B Lightning II aircraft, CH-53E Super Stallion, and CH-46E Sea Knight helicopters, or more recently MV-22B tilt rotors, cruisers, destroyers, and attack submarines. Strike Group 5 is based in Yokosuka, Japan, and in part of the US 7th Fleet. The 7th Fleet also has ship components in Sasebo, Japan, and at Apra Harbor Naval Base, Guam. If US carriers are cut back, will the US maintain its bases in Japan and elsewhere? The Marines are also undergoing a major transformation, including a downsizing of the number of serving Marines and a change in mission, making them more a US Navy adjunct than an independent strike force used in an expeditionary mission. Overall, the rationale of getting rid of two carriers is to save money that can be sunk into buying a new class of small combatants like the European FREM class frigate. We'll probably look this up. I've never seen this before, or you heard of it, so I'm going to look that up. The FREM is a joint French and Italian multi-purpose frigate built by Armors of France and Orizzonte Sistemi Navali of Italy, a joint venture between Fincantieri, Italy's main shipbuilder, and Leonardo, Italy's largest defense conglomerate. FREM frigates have a sophisticated air defense capability and can be used as an anti-warfare submarine warfare platforms. Exactly what the US plans are for a FREM type warship is unclear, and exactly why it would be superior to existing platforms such as the Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyers has not been explained. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's another 7 minutes or so, but yeah, US getting out of the Pacific. Very interesting. Go ahead, Menace Wall.
Yeah, I mean, that's a polite way of saying it, but they're just scaling back their spending in certain areas that it just don't need to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing. I mean, be prepared for a lot of stuff to be getting cut back. A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just showed you this virus did more damage than any attack on America in American history combined. This one virus attack.
It's a it's a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah. You didn't need a ship. You didn't need anything. You just needed there in an active environment like a Madison Square Garden or a Super Bowl. And you could have the same thing happen all over again. All over the country at any given time. There's no real way to test people real time. It changes a lot of stuff, man. Forever.
There's no question about it. And this virus has also, people don't want to talk about it, how it's adversely truly affected our military. And I know they've kept that kind of quiet, but this has been actually a national security event as well. As we see, with our Navy and in our Army with our troops. So, we know that it could travel like wildfire amongst the troops if possible. If it can fully break out there. So we've got real issues with this virus, huge issues, and a lot is just still not being talked about, which I find rather disturbing.
Yeah.
That's why the Navy general is getting punished, kind of like them doctors are getting punished in China. They just don't want people talking about this stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, they did. That's right. Yeah, they just announced this morning a third naval warship is actually contaminated with COVID.
Yeah, I mean this is serious business. This is your Navy we're talking about. So
warship doesn't turn. The warship is not like a SRT-8 fast land-based vehicle. That thing goes out to sea, man. It takes a long time for that thing to turn back around.
To hit, doesn't exactly turn around on a dime, and then you have to understand you're looking at 5,000-6,000 people or so that may be on a vessel like that. So it's almost like a little town, cruising around out there. So it's and I do know some people who actually were on some of those ships. And when they got their mail, it had its own zip code. So anyway, I'm not trying to go off on that, but yet this is a fairly significant piece of our defense forces, and if this is getting adversely affected at this level, what else is going on?
Well, they also point out in the article the DF-26. I wanted to make sure I highlighted the DF-26 because this is a carrier killer. This is something that is made to destroy fleets. It's nuclear capable. Usually uses conventional, but even if it does have a conventional, one hit from one of these things and it's going to wipe out a carrier. There is no coming back from that. It doesn't limp home. It sinks below. And judging by this picture right here, China has a whole lot of them. Pointed at Guam, pointed at Okinawa. Yeah, maybe it is time to get the hell up out of here. Especially with COVID coming through. Like, the good excuse would be it's because of COVID, but the real excuse is that you have probably about 24, 36 of these missiles pointed at your bases.
Well, China definitely is going to look to respond after a while, because as you and I know, as the film that that we watch, the coming war on China, we have China basically, by Pilsy, yes, we have a ring around China militarily. We actually have them surrounded, circled, and it's just going to be a matter of time before China starts to develop the better weaponry, better systems to deal, and then they're going to attempt or start to buck that system, and it's within their interest to do that. So we're going to have to look at this deeply. This is serious business. What do you think, MLT?
Yeah, it's just not good, because at the end of the day, the power is waning here, and there's an opening for a whole bunch of countries to come together and kind of dislodge all types of agreements that they were in and go after their own interests, not really in the interest of the United States. This stuff is going to start happening everywhere. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, now it's the time to get out. But remember during World War II, before Pearl Harbor, they pulled their ships out of Pearl Harbor just before the Chinese got there.
Yeah, and and a lot of people said that was a ridiculous mistake, but we were supposed to not know that this was going to happen when it looks like we may have had some knowledge about it. We may have encouraged that to happen to get involved in the war as well. This is all the stuff you hear now post World War II and post the attack on Pearl Harbor, but still a lot of issues there, and apparently Roosevelt did know that there was an impending attack on Pearl Harbor. The Japanese were potentially looking at that, and we opened it up we literally opened it up for them to come in there so we can get into the war. Whether or not that's the truth or not, another story.
We'll never know either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because they pulled their forces from Guam too at the time that they were that this was happening. It wasn't just Hawaii that they pulled out of, or Pearl Harbor that they pulled out of. They pulled out of Guam too. They pulled out of very close from those places.
And so you
Well, his
couldn't really
cousin,
respond.
exactly, and his cousin, Theodore Roosevelt, who was president, some almost 30 years before, predicted that the Japanese would attack, these areas because he felt they're a little too far flung and we wouldn't be able to really protect them that well. That's more in their area than ours, South Pacific, and they would attack. They would attack these areas, and he was right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's not the Japanese doing it, the fucking Chinese doing it, right? So
Chinese doing it, but you have to look at this from this perspective as well.
mm-hmm.
The Chinese become more militarized. How do you think Japan is going to respond after a period of time? They're going to start. They're going to start to arm up as well. Don't think that they won't. They will.
They already have.
Yeah, they have, and they're going to get more aggressive. So, this is part of their long-range plan as well. Japan had a 250-year plan. A lot of people have forgotten about that. The bomb, tore them out the frame, and then they thought that they were finished. But they came out of that as an industrial, muscular nation that's capable of putting together some fairly decent defenses. And that only thing you just need is to have China start to rise up and get a more militaristic view there in that area where Japan might in fact be worried about its own safety, and these guys are going to start getting back to the days of the old rising sun. And I think that we're on the precipice of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, MOT? Agreed?
For now, I mean, they have a national plan. We don't. Our national plan is to let ignorance run the show. There's no real national model to kind of create engineers. And you're going to get your ass whooped by somebody who has the communistic power age. You're going to lose.
Mm.
You're going to lose badly. It's not going to take that long.
Agreed.
Yeah. Let me jump to this next article. This is from RT.com. Go battle COVID-19 at home. Chinese Navy expels U.S. warship from territorial waters.
When does that ever happen?
A U.S. warship was expelled from disputed South China Sea waters after Beijing's Navy scrambled fighter jets and naval assets to escort it away, accusing Washington of provocative actions at sea. The USS Barry, a guided missile destroyer, trespassed into Beijing's territorial waters near the disputed Shisha Islands, also known as the Paracel Islands, on Tuesday, the People's Liberation Army Navy said in a statement. The incident marks the first time the Navy actively announced an illegal trespass in the area, according to the Global Times. The U.S. provocative actions violated international law and related norms, seriously violated Chinese sovereignty and security interests, and intentionally increased regional security risk, said Senior Colonel Li Hongbin, a spokesperson of the PLA Southern Theater Command, adding that the action could have led to an accident. Earlier this week, the Barry traversed the nearby Taiwan Strait in its second routine transit this month, the U.S. Navy said, closely followed by a Chinese aircraft carrier on both occasions. American warships regularly patrol the strait, as well as the South and East China Seas, citing the need to protect freedom of navigation, but Beijing has repeatedly slammed the operation as infringing on its sovereignty. Tensions between Washington and Beijing have seen a steep rise in recent weeks, with both sides trading accusations regarding the coronavirus pandemic and its origins. U.S. officials, including President Donald Trump, claimed that China concealed vital information in the early stages of the health crisis, even freezing funding for the World Health Organization over its supposed role in the cover-up. Beijing has hit back by insinuating that the U.S. military may have had a hand in the original COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan, while a number of Chinese officials have rejected the U.S. allegations, insisting it shared information on the virus as soon as it was available. Made up by some 40 isolates and reefs, the Paracel Islands are claimed by China, Vietnam, and Taiwan, which itself is also regarded by Beijing as its own territory. But since a short military confrontation over the archipelago with
yes.
Vietnam in 1974, China has maintained control of the islands, which are now administered by the provincial government of Hainan. Washington, however, does not recognize Beijing's territorial claim, considering the area around the island chain to be international waters. I don't know. Go home and go fight your COVID. What they told him.
Yeah. Like it's time to go home. Call your United States military to go home.
Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm thinking about those aircraft carriers, those 2 aircraft carriers. I think they may sell one of them to Japan. Okay, they won't sell it to Taiwan. That would be too risky. China to come in and sink that.
Oh yeah, risky shit.
Yeah, but they'll definitely sell one to Japan, and then sell the second one to Saudi Arabia.
I think so.
Yeah, they have a lot of cash. They need it. They need to feel more secure because the kingdom is very fragile. MBS is sleeping on a boat somewhere, trying to hide from COVID, paranoid. In order to shore up because I don't think the Fifth Fleet doesn't sit in Saudi Arabia. It sits in Qatar. So Saudi Arabia, for all intents and purposes, does not have an aircraft carrier in its catalog. So they have a lot of money. You know, selling it to Ukraine would be way too risky. The Russians will go in there and destroy.
Ukraine?
No.
No.
Definitely not. I mean, you may be right about that. The U.S. could use the cash. So,
old aircraft carrier, who needs it? In the U.S., who needs it?
No, dude, we have a lot of obsolete stuff that we can't use.
Yeah.
A lot of obsolete stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is it that you got a virus can do this much damage to an economy? It pretty much makes useless a $700 and something billion a year defense apparatus. If you can be wiped out by a damn virus, makes it null and void.
It's showing you. Great point. It's showing you just how useless a lot of this spending we're doing. One thing I can say about this COVID, with all of its bad that it has within it, and it is bad, it is elucidating upon a lot of the BS and effery we got going on out here, and it's just showing it in a very glaring way. All that money we're spending on the military, like I said, a virus could literally shut your economy down, cripple in some respects, or hobble your military and so forth. And we don't even have the proper, prophylaxis against something like this, even in our country, by way of masks, gloves, and so forth. So here we are struggling and dealing with this and trying to get our economy back and getting ready to send people back to work without half the people getting tested to get torn out the frame.
Not only
again,
tested,
this is going to show
mask, no protection. Every state got their own idea of how this stuff's going to work. No actual standards. I mean, this stuff has been going on for how long?
Nothing standardized. So, and we're spending 700, billion, and this kind of money on
a year
on the military
every year.
Per year. Useless, going into the pockets of the wealthy weaponeers. And what's that doing for people? I mean, it's just showing you just how effed up our priorities are and where we're really at. We're way off the mark, man. We're way off of it. We're out of it, man. These guys have been living in a freaking delusional dream world for the last 30 years. And here it is. This should be a wake up call for everyone.
We have to rethink how we do
serious wake.
We have to rethink
Yeah,
how we do everything.
we just do everything.
Go ahead, Hamilton.
Everything.
It just doesn't, like, I don't think people understand that, dude. You need like a Marshall Plan to get this stuff back at this point. To half of where it was before. You got 44 million people who are unemployed. Probably another 25 is coming right after that, on the heels of that. As soon as this money runs out. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to overhaul our healthcare system. We're going to have to overhaul some aspects of our economy. There are a lot of, and these are some really, really hard questions we're going to have to ask as to what directions that we're willing to take. And, you know, there are some hardliners who are not going to want to do what we're going to need to do. But that's the whole thing about this overhaul you're talking about. This is going to be big. Wow.
Yeah, let me get to the next item on the docket from the Asia Times. Time may be ripe for China to invade Taiwan. Pandemic has left a U.S. security vacuum around self-governing island China has oft vowed to reincorporate the mainland.
I'm shocked that hasn't happened in the past 5 years, but okay.
Yeah. Has the COVID-19 pandemic created the strategic conditions for a U.S.-China clash over Taiwan? China has recently provocatively deployed fighter jets and nuclear-capable bombers near the self-governing island Beijing considers a renegade province that must be reincorporated to the mainland. On April 23rd, Taipei announced that China's Liaoning aircraft carrier and 5 accompanying warships sailed through the channel between Taiwan and the Philippines in an overt show of force. Tit for tat, U.S. warships have sailed twice this month through the narrow Taiwan Strait between the island and the mainland, including in recent days the USS Barry guided missile destroyer. The U.S. 7th Fleet's spokesman, Lieutenant Anthony Junko, and the deployment was a routine transit, and its presence in the waterway demonstrated America's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, according to the news reports. Those deployments and pronouncements have no doubt bid to dispel notions that a strategic vacuum has opened in the South China Sea and near the Taiwan Strait as the U.S. grapples with a COVID-19 outbreak that has taken nearly 60,000 American lives. They also come amid heightened U.S.-China tensions seen in American opposition to China's territorial claims in the South China Sea, support for a pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, unresolved trade disputes, and now with each side blaming the other for starting the pandemic. While the U.S. has no legal obligation to intervene militarily if China invaded Taiwan, security analysts doubt that Washington would stand by idly if Beijing launched such an assault, even as U.S. President Donald Trump has paid less attention to security issues in the Asia Pacific than his predecessor, Barack Obama. Trump has done a lot to alienate regional allies like leaving the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, shaking down South Korea and Japan over defense costs and so on, but has, for whatever reason, done more to support Taipei than any other U.S. president since the de-recognition in 1979, said a U.S.-based security analyst. In that year, Washington established diplomatic relations with Beijing while ties with Taipei became more informal. But Taiwan remains an old Cold War era ally that the U.S. cannot afford to abandon for broad and wide strategic reasons. The self-governing island remains a crucial link in the string of military partners that the U.S. has assembled around China's eastern flank, along with Japan, South Korea, and until recently, the Philippines. As such, the U.S. has provided Taiwan with vital military material, over years for its self-defense. Still, analysts say it's not clear if Taiwan would be able to withstand a Chinese invasion attempt. In the past, Taiwan's defenses were more modern and sophisticated than China's, but a military buildup in China means that the strategic balance may have tilted in Beijing's favor. Earlier this month, China launched another 40,000-ton amphibious assault vessel, the second of its 075 class, and seemingly built to bust Taiwan's shoreline defenses. Taiwan has no ships in its navy that compare to those two massive troop carriers. Nor is it clear how much support Taipei could realistically expect from the US in light of Trump's America First policies and apparently subtly weakened US defense posture in the region. That said, Taiwan boasts US supplied top of the line defense equipment to point back in Beijing's direction.
Wow, China's stacking up.
Well, they had a lot of time to do it too. In September 2018, the US approved a $330 million arms sale to Taiwan to improve its defense capabilities. The deal covered parts for Taiwan's fleet of F-16s, C-130s, and F-5 military aircraft and related logistics and program support elements. With China hawks like US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Secretary of Defense Mike Esper in Trump's administration, such material support for Taiwan is likely to continue. At the same time, it seems unlikely that China would risk a showdown with the US in the Taiwan Strait at this delicate moment. China watchers believe that Chinese President Xi Jinping has set an undeclared deadline of this year for a final decision on whether to invade Taiwan, but opinions vary as to whether that is truly his intent. In a January 2019 speech, Xi said that Taiwan would have to abide by the one country, two system formula formula now governing Hong Kong. He said he wanted a peaceful reunification, but also reserved the right to use force. It's unclear how much his calculus may have changed in light of the open support Taiwan has provided Hong Kong's anti-Beijing pro-democracy demonstrators, including through the provision of gas masks and providing sanctuary to activists of the on the run from the possible arrest. Some observers speculate that next year, the centenary of the ruling Communist Party of China's founding will be a crucial year for Taiwan. Other analysts believe that is too soon, and that 2049, the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the People's Republic of China, is a more likely date. It's unlikely that Xi will still be in power at that time, which could mean China will move much sooner. Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic of China, PRC, unified the country and then had his armies invade and annex Tibet. China's second strongman, Deng Xiaoping, negotiated the return to China of the British-run Hong Kong and Portuguese-held Macau. Xi, who is known to see himself as third of modern China's great leaders, would likely want to oversee the final reunification of all Chinese territories, namely Taiwan, during his tenure. Much, of course, depends on how depends on how the COVID-19 crisis plays out. Some analysts argue that Xi could seek to stir nationalistic fires and launch a foreign military adventure against Taiwan to distract from the country's sudden economic problems and attendant rising unemployment. Meanwhile, 40,000 American troops, 20,000 National Guard members are currently bogged down in the COVID-19 fight at home. That's a lot of troops. That could have influenced the abrupt and unexplained sudden ending on April 16th of the Pentagon's B-52 powered continuous bomber presence mission in Guam, a US-controlled island from where the US maintained capabilities to project power into the Pacific. The bombers are now permanently stationed on the US mainland. while they will continue to operate in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. But that is not the same as stationing them on Guam. Defense analyst Joseph Trevor-Thick argued in an article on strategic website Drive. He argued the bombers on Guam were a cornerstone of U.S. power projection and deterrence capabilities in the region. It is undeniable that the U.S. military's force posture in the Pacific region has just undergone a major shift. Yeah. Significantly, Taiwan itself has not been weakened by the virus crisis, with only 428 COVID-19 cases and 6 deaths among a population of 23 million. Taiwan has instead won international audits for its death handling and containment of the lethal disease. Indeed, Taiwan is now competing head-to-head with China's face mask diplomacy by sending protective medical equipment to European Union countries. EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen recently issued a statement thanking Taiwan for its donation, including 5.6 million face masks, saying the bloc appreciated the gesture of solidarity. Taiwan has also sent masks and medical equipment to the US and smaller island nations in the Pacific and the West Indies, which maintain the diplomatic ties with Taiwan rather than. So, I don't know, man. They do have a it's from the U.S. Sitting in Taiwan that, if used properly, they could defend themselves for a few hours. But after that, man, I think it's game over.
A few hours.
Yeah, a few hours, man. You might stand off for a few hours. I mean, because remember that Taiwan has multiple islands around it. So you would have to get through those islands first. If you're China, you have to get through those islands first. You start sending bomber jets and stuff like that there, those Patriot batteries would actually shoot those down.
Yeah, they would.
It's just an interesting idea to be floating this idea that China's going to move on Taiwan. I mean, they could have moved on them anytime they wanted to.
But it would have been bloody, MOT. It would have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
That first wave of landing in airborne troops would have landed right into hell. They wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, because they would have run right into the teeth of their air defenses. That would have been a real problem.
Yeah.
It's not really within China's interest, I don't think, to really get into that kind of war.
Yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, I agree with yet, but as of now, negotiate and try to work this thing out in a I would say in a more business-like, kind of friendly fashion. I think they'll do better.
They're moving too fast as a country to be stopping to do stupid stuff like this. I don't think it's not even a priority of theirs to even be doing this type of stuff. Really, I don't think so.
You don't think?
Not yet. I just don't see. I mean,
there's nothing to gain.
They know they're going to overtake.
Yeah, there's nothing to gain. Their country is doing substantially well from an industrialization standpoint. You try to take the island, that would be a bloody fight. That would be China's Vietnam.
It would. It wouldn't make it just wouldn't make a lot of sense right now, and I don't think China's looking to move that. I mean, they may be doing a little saber rattling just to let people know, hey, listen, we're carrying some big sticks here. But maybe let's deal with this a little differently.
Yeah.
More diplomatically, I would say, for right now.
Yeah, we got DE rapping on the panel as well.
DE.
Hello, Nagoon, MOT. How you guys doing?
All right, man. You have
How you doing, Mike?
What's going on, big man?
Shalom, brother. Do you have any insight on this?
Well, the U.S. still has a couple of cards that it can play.
Really?
Yeah. One of them, they have refused to play for 50 years, and I keep waiting to see when they put it on the table, because they have to deal with France, and their other buddy in England, and I don't think they want to put that card on the table because it's gonna cause a lot of problems. Um, that one is like an ace in the hole, and for me, I think they should play it now, because it will force China to kind of look east instead of west.
Okay.
I don't want to say it right out because I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? It's
Mhm.
and the other one is the other card that they can play is in South America and South America and the Caribbean.
Why do you say
But
that?
it would involve changing the whole attitude about my backyard policy, and I can do what I feel like doing. You have to become nicer. They all have to put on white gloves and invite everybody to Washington, and wine and dine them and
Mhm.
send them home feeling like they're a partner. And if they're gonna do anything in the Caribbean and South America after that,
Mhm.
they're gonna call everybody and say, "Hey, look, we think about doing this. Do you think it's a good idea? Are you on board? And we're not gonna move without you." They gotta prove that we're not gonna move without you against, like what they did in Venezuela. Venezuela was a prime example of what they did. That they wasted a card instead of calling Maduro and say, "Hey, look, hey, let us help you build a country. You know, we see you doing some things here, and let's help you do." Right now, America be most welcome in Venezuela. Tell them the poor people down there will be partying when you mention the name America, but they went about it the wrong way. The same thing they did in Africa when they went through and killed everybody in '73. Um, it left the door open for Chairman Mao to come in and bring the Cubans and the Russians in,
Mhm.
and start the agitation in Africa. And now, you know, the other foolish thing that they did was allow China to get all the raw materials it can from Africa to build for them what they wanted. And
Mhm.
you know, but America does some foolish things. The other thing is this thing in the Middle East. They allow this idiot that right now wanna chop another piece off the Palestinians. And he feel comfortable that Trump is going to say okay with it, that the U.S. is going to say okay with it. He's just full of himself,
So
just
you're saying,
bragging about it.
if the U.S. uses soft diplomacy with China, that they can actually
No, not with China, but
with Taiwan.
with the people. No, 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 no. The time for that is past. They can't do anything about Taiwan anymore. They can play the little. We're gonna sail any place we want to go. China can accept that.
Mhm.
You know, China will accept that
Mhm.
and keep an eye on them. China will keep an eye on them while they're doing that. Learn their tactics and what weaponry they have, communication systems, and all that. That's what China was doing. But I'm talking about soft diplomacy in South America, all
Oh,
the way from Mexico all the way down. You know, instead of stirring up trouble, like I said in Venezuela, instead of going after Maduro, make him an ally. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
everybody that's in South America, you make them allies. You
Okay.
sit them down, talk to them. I mean, you can talk to a man and make him know that you mean business, but you're still smiling. You know what I'm saying? And you can shake his hand and say, "Look, I would like you to do this. I appreciate you doing this. But only thing now is if you don't do it, we're gonna push back." You know what I'm saying? We're not gonna. take you out. We're not going to kill you or destroy your country or something like that. But, we're going to show you our displeasure still. You know what I'm saying? We might stop you from exporting. Instead of $100 million a year, you might only get 10. So then you got to answer to your people. But we're not going to kick you out or kill you or something like that. But you're still diplomatic, but you're still friendly. And if they'd done that in South America, they'd have no problem. They wouldn't have a problem with Cuba at all. They wouldn't have a problem with Venezuela. They have a problem with Bolivia. They wouldn't have had a problem with Lula. None of that would happen. And they created the same problem in Africa.
All right, let me jump to this next item on the docket from foreignaffairs.com. How Trump can end the war in Syria. Putin and Erdogan are finally ready to negotiate. In the summer of 2011, as Syria's peaceful protest movement began mutating into a full-blown civil war, Syrian opposition activists begged U.S. President Barack Obama to aid their efforts to oust the country's authoritarian leader, Bashar al-Assad. The dissidents were received with great warmth and sympathy by the State Department officials and by lawmakers from both political parties, but the Obama administration already focused on preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons and keen to avoid the quagmire of sectarian conflict, declined to intervene. For the next 5.5 years, as the war in Syria killed hundreds of thousands of people and displaced millions, Obama offered rhetorical and humanitarian support to the Syrian rebels, but little more. He repeatedly failed to take the kind of decisive action that might have ended Assad's brutal rule or changed the course of the bloody conflict. Since entering office in 2017, this is behind the wall, but I don't think Trump has any aces in his deck to do anything about Syria. That's just me personally. I think it's the time for it. The only thing he can do is just pull his troops out and call it a day and leave the courage to fight, to their own mercy. And the reason why I say this is that the Kurds are actually Syrian citizens of Syria. They have rights in Syria under the Constitution. What should have happened is that Assad should have called on the Syrian Kurds to take those uniforms off and put on Syrian troop uniforms. In that way, if Erdogan decides to come in and kill, any Kurds, they'd be killing the Syrian soldiers. And that way you have justification to actually take it to the next level and negotiate. If he doesn't want to negotiate at the table, you just go to war with him. But at the same time, you gotta use whatever legal framework is in place. And I think that Trump already lost that battle a long time ago. Should have pulled his troops out as soon as he came into office. Said, get these guys out of here. But somebody else in his cabinet decided that they were going to keep them here. So it's not him making those decisions. So I think that's long out of his reach. But I do think that Putin could play a very strong card by taking all of those Syrian Kurds, forcing them to put on Syrian Arab Army uniforms and doing joint patrols with the Kurds. Okay, and that way, one, they're protected, and two, if they are attacked by Erdogan's army, it will be a declaration of war. You hit a Russian soldier, you hit a Syrian army soldier, you have a declaration of war at that point, and therefore all bets are off. That would end it. So that's just my take on that. I don't think that Trump can do anything at this point, and I don't think he wants to do anything either.
No, you're right. You're right. That would end it real quick.
Yeah.
And by not ending it, they're allowing, like I said, I put a thing in the chat just now. Watch what Turkey does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowing Turkey to a wide range of options and what they want to do. and where they want to go and how they want to move. And I am sorry. I'm well, not sorry to say, but Turkey is Turkey's taking advantage of things that they didn't. They true, and they're gonna keep on moving. With China going against the U.S., Russia trying to secure I said the western flank. Turkey is gonna fill that hole that is being left open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless Iraq decides to get involved in that.
The Iraqis really, since Saddam, even during Saddam, the Iraqis weren't really, they had an army, but if you look at what happened to Iran and Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the army that wasn't even as armed as well as the Iraqis, the Iranians still trashed them, you know. So I'm not the best option for anybody else in that area is really probably Egypt. What Egypt does, because all the other people got a lot of money, but not any brains or power to back it up. While Egypt don't have a lot of money, but they have the brains and the military power to back it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me go to the next item on the docket from AlJazeera.com. Turkey, Haftar aims to create military dictatorship in Libya. Expand this out. Turkey has accused Libya's eastern-based military commander Khalifa Haftar of seeking to create a military dictatorship and vow to defend the government in the capital Tripoli. Haftar's withdrawal from a landmark 2015 United Nations brokered agreement to unite the country, which Haftar turned a thing of the past on Monday, showed his true intentions. Turkey's foreign ministry said in a statement on Wednesday. With this announcement, Haftar has once again demonstrated that he does not seek a political solution to the crisis in Libya, does not support international efforts in this regard, and aims to create a military dictatorship in the country. The Turkish Foreign Ministry said in April 2019, Haftar launched an offensive to wrest control of the capital from the internationally recognized Government of National Accord, GNA. On Monday, after his self-styled Libyan National Army was expelled from several western cities, Haftar said he accepted the will of the people and vowed to create a new government. The political agreement destroyed the country. We will work to create the conditions for building permanent civic institutions, he said in a televised address. In late November, Turkey and the GNA has signed 2 agreements relating to enhanced security cooperation and maritime border demarcation. GNA officials say those deals enabled their ground forces to retake large swaths of territory from Haftar, who in turn has the backing of, among others, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. The ministry said the international community should respond without further delay to this person who undoubtedly exposed his intention to establish a junta regime in Libya. Turkey will definitely continue to stand by the brotherly Libyan people in defending the Government of National Accord and all other legitimate institutions of Libya established with the Libyan political agreement, and to support the efforts for a political solution. Yeah. Turkey is taking a very strong position by supporting the United Nations recognized government. It legitimizes them, and 2, it also sends a message to Egypt, UAE, and Saudi Arabia that if there is a military conflict, we will hit you back. We have the capability to do so. And we'll see what you're capable of doing. I don't think that Saudi Arabia is going to get into a conflict with Turkey. I don't think that UAE, despite all of its technical wherewithal, I don't think they're going to be willing to do it. In Egypt, I don't think Egypt will risk would risk going into a conflict with Turkey over Libya. I just don't see them doing that. What's valuable to Egypt and Libya is the oil and the gas, possibilities of gas in there. It will be only a few hours to pump that stuff into Egypt. So I don't know. Egypt stands to gain the most, but would hurt the most as well.
Yeah, that's the one to call, but definitely Saudi Arabia is definitely not going to move on Turkey. And I think in a 1v1 conflict, I don't think Saudi Arabia would do too well against Turkey, to be quite frank with you. But where Egypt stands and what they stand again, yeah, a lot of oil, and they're in a hot area as well. That's tough. Talking about that's an incendiary situation, man. A lot of stuff can go up over that. So I certainly hope we don't see that.
You mean between Egypt and Turkey?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, that'll eventually happen. It will eventually happen. Because the battle over Eastern Mediterranean is going to drag them into it regardless, whether they want to get into it or not.
Yeah. You don't see a diplomatic solution going down with that. You see that this is definitely going to come. This is definitely going to come to an armed conflict.
Put it like this: the Muslim Brotherhood is supported by Turkey. Egypt have imprisoned,
and the Muslim Brotherhood,
all of the Muslim Brotherhood
is in Egypt.
members. Yeah, they have imprisoned most of them.
Yeah. They're in Egypt, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm just looking at this, huh?
Yeah,
that would be a. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Morsi, when he was in power, he tried to build better relations with Iran. I mean, think about the implications behind this, right? You're Egypt, you're this you're this left-leaning, not so much as Muslim Brotherhood leaning sort of state, and you have a president who is supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, who he himself has tried to reach out to Iran and Turkey to strengthen ties. Once he did that, they got him out of office. That was it. Get him out of here. So what I'm saying here is, for Turkey, they're going to be an adversary to Egypt no matter what. For Egypt, there's a vested interest in making sure that you don't have a fire in your backyard in Libya, and that you can actually benefit from stability there if you can get the oil out of there, because the oil contracts, there's still a lot of oil in Libya. In fact, Libya
there's a huge amount of oil in Libya. That's their biggest export. That's the biggest product they have. Huge amount of oil. That's what kept that country wealthy.
Yeah, 3.8 million.
Huge amount of oil.
3.8 million barrels of oil pumped per day out of there is pretty significant. If Egypt can get 1 million barrels a day, that's actually pretty good. Because then their energy consumption and security is taken care of.
Yeah.
The whole Sahara is, how would I put it? Oil patch, or oil patch sitting on top of water. That's it. If they have everything that they need. Seriously, it's covered by sand. It's just that it's covered by sand. Traditionally, Turkey and Egypt have always been enemies. I mean, if you go back to Pharaoh used to be bragging about the Hittites. Hittites were the Turks, or one of the Turks. The other one was the I forgot the name of the people now, but they become mixed up with the Syrians to become what the Syrians what the Turks don't like today. The animosity to them, to the Turks, and they're scattered through Syria, Iran, and what was it, Iraq? The Kurds.
Kurds.
That's the other traditional enemy of the Turks.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if Egypt and Iran were to form any kind of strategic alliance, they would be a real challenge for the Turks.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. There will be no Ottoman Empire. Even now, there is no possibility of an Ottoman Empire that previously stood fast back then.
No.
It definitely isn't. But I think the Turks, like I said, I think they have some delusions of that. But you know, could they pull that off right now in the 21st century? No, I don't believe that can be done. But I think these guys have some of these. They have some desires. They have some desires for this.
Well, they'll die trying it, but they'll never be able to establish it. They'll never have security on their end because they also have to deal with the European Union.
Absolutely.
Because the idea of Turkey joining the European Union, that's already out of the cards now. They lost that back in 2011, 2009. That was it.
Well, Turkey is a part of NATO. Am I correct?
Yeah, but that's not the same as economic integration into the European Union, which is what they wanted, right? Because Turkey does $80 billion in revenue in trade between themselves and the European Union, whereas what they do with the United States is less than $10 billion, and it's even less now. So you're talking about maybe $5 billion at this point. The idea of integrating themselves into the European Union, that's out of the window now because what would you have to? They don't really want Turkey being part of it, despite all of the Turkish citizens who have EU memberships and whatnot. They're not really welcomed into the European Union. They're not traditional Europeans in that regard.
No, they're not. They definitely are not.
Yeah, so Turkey doesn't really have a whole lot of cards to play in that regard. And going to war with your neighboring states just to restructure the Ottoman Empire is never going to work. Israel would never do something like that.
I definitely do not see that happening. I saw some of the moves they were looking at as though this is something that they want to do. And then you had many other people in the media kind of prognosticating this, saying this is what they're looking to do and so forth. And I think they may have some delusions of grandeur, but them really being able to pull us off militarily, no chance. No chance at this stage. No chance at this stage, no.
No, Arab nationalism would never support that. That would unite all the Arab countries against Turkey and come down on top of their heads.
And then you also have to look at Russia coming into that conflict as well and dealing with the Crimea and all that. Forget about it. Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. Let me move on to the next item on the docket from Press TV. Any U.S. infringement of Iran territorial waters will draw tough response. We do not joke with anyone when it comes to the issue of our defense, he added. The comments came after a recent tweet by U.S. President Donald Trump in which he alleged that he had directed the U.S. Navy to shoot down and destroy Iranian gunboats that harass American ships following a recent confrontation between U.S. warships and Iranian military boats in the Persian Gulf. According to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, American vessels resorted to unprofessional and perilous behavior in the waters during the incident, causing trouble for one of the elite forces logistical ships that was conducting a routine patrol. A U.S. Navy statement has, however, alleged that 11 IRGC gunboats had closed in on 6 U.S. naval vessels in the Persian Gulf in dangerous and harassing approaches. The IRGC has strongly dismissed the statement, calling the account a Hollywood tale. Shikashi said Trump's remarks serve psychological warfare purposes and tarnishing the public opinion, charming voters to help him get reelected and also helping him avoid criticism over his mishandling of domestic affairs. The Americans, the spokesmen that are waging a smear campaign to demonize the Islamic Republic. Let me advance this person in. The Islamic Republic, while they themselves are in a contravention of international law and causing problems here. Still, referring to the maritime incident, Shikashi said the Islamic Republic wondered what business the United States and its forces had in the region. He further asked, what do they want from the regional countries in the Persian Gulf waters, while the countries of the region are perfectly capable of providing its security? Not only do they not have any answer for this question, but they also cause harassment and trample on international law, the military official said. He named some of the violations committed by the U.S. forces in the region as troubling fishermen, ignoring environmental issues, and accosting the regional countries' military centers. Earlier, the General Staff of Iranian Armed Forces issued a statement warning against any U.S. provocations that would cause insecurity in the Persian Gulf region, noting that regional states were perfectly capable of maintaining security without the need of any foreign intervention. Interesting. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, we laugh at those gunboats, but those things are armed. If you really, let me zoom in on this. If you look at the top of the top of the roof of those boats, those are all missiles. Those are what do you call them? Multiple launch MLRS, multiple rocket launch systems on tacked on top of these on the hoods. So you're talking about, these are like pickup trucks in water, like Tacoma Toyota pickup trucks in the desert. These are like pickup trucks in the water with rockets strapped to them. I mean, if we zoom out of it, there's probably about maybe at best 13, 15, maybe 20 of them would probably have about 12 missiles on them apiece. You add that up, you got about 144 missiles coming at your boat. I don't know if U.S. defense systems have the capability of stopping an onslaught like that on a boat.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, bro. What's going on?
Hey, how you doing?
Oh,
yeah, you know the funny thing about that the truck analogy with the the Toyota pickup with the 50 cal on the back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what those things shoot at, right? They shoot at our armored personnel carriers and our tanks. So it's the equivalent of going up against our tank. And yeah, you're right in the sense that they pack a certain amount of firepower. I mean, they're rockets, but are they like warheads that can punch a hole in battleship armor? Because these ships aren't just like a few layers of steel just enough to make a boat float. Like they're kind of armored too. Well,
so in a way, you're right that the side of the ship is really heavily armored, but the top of the ship is actually hollow.
Well, no, and that brings me to another point. I can tell you that looking at those things, it's hard to imagine those rockets are very sophisticated. So in order for a rocket to go from the sea surface to the top of, let's say, an aircraft carrier surface, because that's really the best damage you could do to the fleet right now. Punch a hole in the runway of the aircraft carrier. Maybe you can punch through and blow up a couple planes and have secondary explosions or something, right? But that takes a sophisticated rocket system.
They have it.
Like, the rocket has to fly horizontally off the boat, vertically into the air, track its target, and then land in another vertical dive, essentially. That takes a lot of programming that I couldn't even begin to imagine. So it's hard to imagine Iran can do that too when they like just now launching semi-decent satellites.
Well, keep in mind that Iranians are actually the most educated in the Middle East.
I'm not saying they're dumb people. I'm saying their military is probably not what we're expecting. Their military is probably not the fighters we think they are compared to the modern U.S. military. And you got to remember, America stays in a fight. It's not like we take time off to lick our wounds. We just put new boys in this fucking fight. So who has Iran fought like us in the last 20 years? They've only fought Iraq, I guess.
You know what?
Iraq.
I would agree with you saying. I think Iran is definitely more adroit. I would say at an asymmetric type of type of conflagrations as opposed to really direct symmetric combat. So I would definitely agree with you on that. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that would be within their interest to really come straight at our troops or not so much our troops, but let's say our ships and our military, and our Navy and so forth, mm-hmm. Or even Marines or however we're going to play that on a 1v1 conflict. I don't think that they can match well with us over time, especially if it becomes a battle of a bit more of attrition. I think that they would definitely take it harder because we were very top heavy army, so on military. So this is what we're good at. We're good at just throwing a lot of troops, throwing a lot of war material at you, and just coming at you like that. We're very top heavy. Mm-hmm. Way to really fight us is more from an asymmetric perspective. So I would tend to agree with what you're saying on that for sure.
Well, look how you have to. What you just said means you got to reuse those ships, and that's what they're most likely to do. They're not going to send those ships directly at the American fleet. They're going to harass oil tankers, and they're going to cause us some problems on that kind of end.
They every U.S. warship in the Persian Gulf is armed to the teeth. It really isn't. There's still a lot of anti-piracy vessels that can be taken down pretty easily. It's not like the United States is invincible in this area. In fact, they're actually pretty vulnerable, and that's what they're trying to avoid. If you're familiar with this person right here, General Paul Van Viper, he did a tabletop exercise back in 2001, 2002, where he simulated a conflict between the United States and Iran, where he left the red team, which would be Iran, and the blue team being US, and let the red team use conventional methods for an attack against the US. The US was to use all their technological systems. What they found in the tabletop exercise was that 9 times out of 10, the red team actually beat the blue team, the red team being Iran. What the estimate was that the US would lose 25,000 troops in 72 hours. So you say you look at that boat and you say it would take sophistication, no, not necessarily. Not according to Paul Van Riper. They did this in 2002.
Yeah, I mean, some situations may have changed. I can agree with some of that. I mean, I wouldn't like this one, but I would think, that if we threw a lot of heavy stuff at these guys up front, they would have a hard time kind of dealing with some of that. And that's kind of what we're good at. We're still in that World War II kind of mindset in how we would fight a nation, especially from a military perspective, from a naval perspective.
Yeah, but Iran's not going to fight by themselves. They're not going to fight by themselves.
Yeah. Those who have shown to fight against America the best are those who fight asymmetrically and those who fight more from a guerrilla kind of perspective and not face you directly, but attack you from the angles, and
Right.
that and I think that has proven to be successful against us over time. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, let's go to DE Raptor. DE Raptor, did you have anything you want to add to this?
I don't want to see us get into a war with Iran.
Right.
For the sake of the many soldiers that I know would lose their lives. The U.S. couldn't fight a war with Iran putting men on the ground. I mean, if suppose they want to attack Iran from Iraq or from any other land, it would be useless.
Mm-hmm.
Serious. They would have to fight. It's just what they did in North Vietnam. Just sending the B-52s and let them drop all the bombs that they can,
Phosphorus,
and come back home. That's about it.
Yeah.
But after they drop the bombs, yes, they will kill a lot of civilians. But the Iranian army is going to be still there to fight them when they come. And even if they don't go into Iran, the world will not be a nice place to be, because wherever Americans are on the planet, they're going to have problems.
Yeah, keep in mind that, Iran's not going to be fighting by themselves. You still have the multiple PMUs inside Iraq. There's 100,000 of them that are still there, armed to the teeth. You still have Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Yemen, and you still have other resources floating about the region, other operatives and whatnot, man, that work undercover. So I don't know. I don't think the U.S. wants to really get into a conflict with them, which is why they probably did the tabletop exercise to determine what would be the damage inflicted upon them. Because a fight in the Middle East like that, going into Iraq was one thing when they were weak. Going into Iran while they're strong with all these sophisticated missiles and stuff like that they have, that they demonstrated, the C-802, the C-772, those missiles are destroyers. They basically take out warships. And they've proven that with Hezbollah in 2006 when they took out an Israeli corvette. The Israelis didn't even know that the Hezbollah even had.
Yeah, and I think the Israelis. Yeah, the Israelis definitely underestimated them. They came in thinking they were going to come in and just wax that ass, and they got shocked. They got surprised. They got caught literally like moments. They got caught with their pants down. So I think they underestimated them. Yeah,
Nasrallah was on TV, live TV, and said, "Look out your windows and look at the Israeli warship." 30 seconds later, it was on fire.
Yeah, that's a fact.
What a conflict would do, because if Hezbollah had it back then, it's guaranteed that whatever Hezbollah had back then, Iran has 2 times better now, because they designed all those missiles. So what are they going to do against a barrage of those type of missiles coming at U.S. warships? The only reason that Israeli corvette didn't sink is because the first missile missed it. It was the second missile that hit it, and then they had to limp off back to southern Israel. But that's the point that I'm making, is that a conflict like that can get very nasty. You lose a couple of warships, man. Even, go ahead.
And Iran has been, kind of preparing for this for a while, because we've been, saber rattling in front of him and talking mad smack at him for some years now. Even going back to the time of McCain, to my bomb, Iran, bomb. You remember that? He was trying to be funny, and people were like, oh, okay. So the Iranians have been, kind of prepping, but I still think Iran's real strength in this kind of battle, which could be problematic, is the asymmetric nature of the conflict that they would run. That would be very problematic for us. Very problematic for us over time. That's what I think that's where I think their real advantage really lies in. We'll try to we could try that out front stuff, and we would see some success, but we would take a lot of hits. Yes, we would. But the asymmetric game, would stretch us out over a longer period of time and create a lot more casualties as time went on, and it would be a problem. It'd be a long, drawn out situation of which we certainly don't want to get involved in. Yeah, but just look at what's going on in Afghanistan and how that whole game was played. So I mean, people have a blueprint for us at this stage now. They have a blueprint for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead. You were gonna say something?
Oh, you guys are right. I mean, there's a lot involved in taking on Iran in a war in the Middle East, and I think the way world opinion will not help the U.S.
Yeah,
so it's since they went into Syria and Libya and all that, the world is gradually changing in its opinion. People are looking at the U.S. action and deciding now, what, this is right and this is wrong. And most of the time they're saying, this is wrong. And even the Europeans say, hey, what are you doing? What are you thinking? How can you be doing this? And they are the allies, and they're saying it out loud for the world to hear, not behind closed doors. So and not only the Iranians that the U.S. has to think about. If they make a move against Iran, then the Russians are going to make a move.
Yeah.
And the Chinese are going to make a move.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you're now creating a problem where you're looking out the front door and somebody's sneaking up your back door.
Because Russia shares a border with Iran too. They can't tolerate that. Can't tolerate a conflict like that. That would be inconceivable to them. There's a fire in their backyard and they can't do anything about it. That's unacceptable.
Not a good idea to go jump in there with the whole Iran thing and all that. That's with the whole TPP. I mean, Obama and them were looking to avoid that to make sure we moved in a certain way. So that just didn't come about. Mm-hmm. These strunzos, these morons that are in here now, they're talking about doing that, and they're not thinking clearly. Their minds ain't right, because this is not a situation that we need to get involved in from a hot military perspective right now, a hot war. We don't. Not a good move. Not a good move for us. Too much going on. Too many players involved. This thing could really get out of hand very quickly.
Remember, Russia landed its Tu-160 nuclear bombers a couple of years ago in Iran.
They did.
As a show of demonstration to the United States that if there's a conflict, this is what we're capable of doing. We can,
and this is how we're rolling. And this is how we're rolling.
Yep.
This is how we're going to roll with them. Yep. I mean, they're not smart. We have to be more intelligent now. So I'm saying you got to have some real smart people out here right now in this game. You can't have mental midgets, with small craniuses and with a small cranium and a small brain operating out here now. It's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Wesley.
According to William Barr, China is now the #1 national security threat to the United States. So a conflict with Iran would only just basically be giving up on confronting China at that point.
Yep. Yep. Because China has what kind of deal with Iran? A lot of oil. Big oil. Big oil contract with them. Matter of fact, Iran is their biggest supplier of oil.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they signed.
Go ahead, Wesley. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
If I remember correctly,
go ahead.
China already inked deals with Iran that they were going to invest around $400 billion over the next 10 years in their oil industry. So that relationship is already set in stone. So it's very tough for especially for these chess masters, checkers masters.
What's going on, you guys? You're definitely right about that. I mean, we still have the hard on from the '79, conflict. Literally, when I say conflict, as far as, Iran, throwing Reza Pahlavi out of there, that sucker laid, and then bring it over, and then of course the Ayatollah coming back, and us losing that asset in that area because they were like our Israel of the period there. That was supposed to be our bully of the region that we had, that we control, and of course, the oil contract we had, they were under our control. We lost that. That's over, and now we want that back, and it's just we're just not going to get that back the way that we want. The way that we want. We don't want it. Mossadegh was there. We helped to overthrow him, and put the put that sucker, put the sucker show back in there. And we can't do that politically over there now. We can't get past the mullahs and everybody. We can't get past these guys. So we do want to do what we can to try to undermine their country. What we're going to have to do is just kind of deal with reality that the game has changed. We're not grabbing them like that again. And we're going to have to come back with some, just like Obama and them had to deal with. We're going to have to deal with the situation differently. That the problem is these mayonnaise dudes running around, still, hanging their Johnson out the window, saying, "I still got the biggest joint in, I still got the biggest joint in the place." It's man, and that's over. You know what I'm saying? No, it's not a dick measuring session anymore for you guys here. That's over. And we're gonna have to deal with that. We just haven't come to grips with that yet, with the current crop of these these neocons and these other sucker legs that are on here right now, still looking to push an old agenda that I don't believe is achievable anymore.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
What's up?
Oh, yeah, I just real quick, I just wanted to see that the whole.
Can I ask you a question?
I don't know.
Nigga.
A complex, you're borging.
No, I wasn't asking the question. I was just stating some realities that we got to deal with. Okay, we're not going in there and controlling Iran like we did back in the back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That shit is over. We're not getting that asset back to the way we had. That's over. Those days are gone. So so we're trying to kind of bring that back around again. That's not going to happen. Obama and them understood that. So they had a whole different way of laying out a game to deal with Iran. Now, these sucker lades are up in here right now thinking that we can, try to push this thing and go back to where things were back in the 50s, where we can kind of depose and undermine the country and get in there and do whatever. We've thrown all these sanctions at them and everything else like that, and it hasn't worked. The sanctions have been painful for them, but it hasn't destroyed their government. It hasn't destroyed their nation. It hasn't finished them. They've been able to end run around some of that. So we've done all we can. We've redlined these dudes as much as possible, sanctioned them as much as possible. And it hasn't toppled their leadership. It hasn't effectively taken out their country's their integrity. We haven't been able to breach that. We haven't been able to knock that out of the box. And it's time for us to deal with this differently now. And that's essentially what I'm saying. We got to get away from this military view and thinking that we can come in here and roll like we used to. These gray boys have to get that in their head that the shit ain't going down like that.
Yeah, they're a very educated society. Iran is they're most educated in the Middle East.
Yeah, they are. These Persians, man.
Yeah,
it's all Persian, man. These are the Persians. They and they've got a long history, 4,000 or 5,000 years in that area. It is what it is.
That predates Blue Eyes.
Predates the gray boys when they were in caves running around, tearing each other out the frame and eating each other. That shit's over. Yeah. That's just how it is. The gray boys are done. They don't want to deal with it.
Same thing with China. China has a 5,000-year history. Russia's can point back 2,000, 3,000 years of their own history.
Exactly.
The problem with the West is that they don't have a real history to point back to.
No.
They don't have anything. They only go so far back before they realize who the real terrorists were.
Yeah,
before there was
exactly.
ISIS, before there was Al Qaeda, before there was the Mujahideen, it was these guys. They were the real terrorists of the West. So there's only so far that they can go back. They don't have a civilization for all intents and purposes. They are an occupation. White Americans, the social construct for what they are not indigenous to the North American continent. They kind of just a hostile takeover. If you let them tell the story, there were no Native Americans. None of these Tanus and stuff like that even existed. That's their biggest problem. They have a hard time understanding the rest of society or the rest of the world. They have a hard time accepting China's place in the world. China is not going to take over the world. At one point, they were the world, right? Their civilization goes back that far. Same thing.
China's never tried to take. Great point, Mike. China's never tried to take over the world. They've never tried it. They've never tried. They never have tried it. Never.
Yeah, that's the problem with white Americans, though. They have a hard time, dealing with history and from that perspective. That people that you're trying to go to war with predate you by thousands of years.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David Monroe. You want to say something?
No, give me a second.
All right. Let me go to this next article because we're running low on time. This is from AlJazeera.com. Apartheid was never prosecuted. South Africa's unfinished business. Former President de Klerk's denial that apartheid was a crime against humanity is a cause for reflection on Freedom Day. Freedom Day, celebrated every year on April 27, commemorates South Africa's first democratic election in 1994, the first time in history of the country that non-white citizens were allowed to vote. The election saw Nelson Mandela replace Frederick William de Klerk to become South Africa's first Black president. Mandela's liberation movement turned political party, the African National Congress, meanwhile took the reins from the white nationalist government that had been in power since 1948. All this transpired without the bloodshed many feared would take place. In the years that led up to those elections, while Mandela was on the face of Black forgiveness, de Klerk became the face of white compromise. In 1990, he took the step of unbanning the ANC and freed Mandela from 27 years in prison. He also agreed to the negotiations that would see the peaceful transition from racist rule to democracy. It was therefore shocking to many when on February 2nd this year, de Klerk publicly stated that apartheid was not a crime against humanity in an interview with the national broadcaster, the SABC. Interesting. During the interview, de Klerk said he was not fully agreeing with the presenter who asked him to confirm that apartheid, the legalized segregation and discrimination against non-white people, was a crime against humanity. Immediately afterwards, the F.W. de Klerk Foundation supported his statement and published a response that read, "Deplorable as it is, we cannot, from a legal point of view, accept that apartheid can in this manner be made a crime against humanity." There was an immediate public outcry as well as criticism from the media and other politicians.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, real quick. So they said that even though it was deplorable, that from a legal standpoint, they couldn't acknowledge, what was that?
And couldn't acknowledge as a crime against humanity.
Right. You do realize that why that is, right?
Oh yeah, because they would self-incriminate themselves. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa called de Klerk's comments treasonous. Apartheid was so immoral in its conception and so devastating in its execution that there is no South African living today who is not touched by its legacy. I would say that to deny this is treasonous, he said. Although de Klerk later retracted his statement, the debacle opened up wounds and raised questions about the legacy and the extent which white South Africans have acknowledged the severity of apartheid. For me and my family, de Klerk's denial of apartheid being a crime against our humanity really hit home quite hard. Lucanio Calata, whose father, Fort Calata, was one of the Craddock Four, a group of activists murdered by apartheid security police in 1985. The comments reinforce our belief that de Klerk has never really seen us as human beings. He's never assigned any human value to our family. In its response to de Klerk's statement, the Economic Freedom Fighters, an opposition party that has called de Klerk an apartheid apologist who has blood on his hands, confirmed it would pursue a murder inquiry into state-sponsored killings that de Klerk had allegedly organized. The organization also called for de Klerk to be stripped of his Nobel Peace Prize, which he received altogether together with Mandela in 1993 for their collaboration in ending apartheid. Motherfuckers. De Klerk, de Klerk, born in 1936, is from a conservative Afrikaner background. His father, Jan de Klerk, was a minister in the cabinet of South African Prime Minister Hendrik French Verwoerd, the man widely regarded as the architect of apartheid. Interesting. For decades, F.W. de Klerk was a committed supporter of apartheid, elected as a member of parliament in 1972. He held the ministerial portfolios of mines and energy affairs, internal affairs, and national education and planning. During his time as a cabinet minister, he was considered more conservative than many of his ministerial colleagues. Farrell Hafaji, a South African journalist, wrote that her abiding memory of de Klerk during apartheid was of the man who passed the university bills that sought to make it more difficult for Black people to gain access to white universities. So it came as a surprise to many when de Klerk announced in Parliament on February 2nd, 1990, that he would unban the ANC and release Mandela. The myth of the liberator, in the decades since, many have asked whether de Klerk's U-turn from his conservative past was the result of pragmatism or of a sincere conviction that apartheid was morally wrong. De Klerk attempted to hold himself aloof from apartheid crimes against humanity, as did many others who were aware of the illegal and extrajudicial acts of the government. South African journalist Marian Tham told Al Jazeera, by convincing himself he did not know of the gory details, he was able to pass himself off as a relatively untainted and progressive leader. On the difference between—
Well, wait a minute. Well, Mike, hold on. Was this, now he's the same guy who said that although the act was deplorable for legal reasons, that they couldn't acknowledge it as a crime against you. That's the guy who said this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the guy who said this?
Yeah.
So how the fuck can he claim aloof? How can he claim aloof? You literally just gave the justification as to why you wouldn't acknowledge it as such, because it's a legal matter. Come on, let's don't play games. Let's not.
It's ridiculous, Complex. Like I said, this guy's family has been balls deep in this game from day one.
Yeah.
They were architects of this thing. Or one of the progenitors of this, if you will.
Yeah,
so,
actually, they had traveled during the Jim Crow to the American South to see how white people were able to maintain Black people. This is how they got the blueprint and brought it back to South Africa. From 1952 to 1990, apartheid was condemned annually by the United Nations General Assembly as contrary to the Charter of the United Nations. The 1973 Apartheid Convention required states to both suppress and punish acts of apartheid. At the time of the signing of this convention, the South African government ignored it. The inclusion of apartheid in 2002 Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court was the strongest acknowledgement yet that apartheid was an international crime. It defines apartheid as inhumane acts of character, similar to the other crimes against humanity committed in the context of institutionalized regime of systematic oppression and domination by one racial group over any other racial group or groups, and committed with the intention of maintaining that regime. Sounds like the United States. Christopher Givers, senior lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, is critical of the trade-off that South Africa's democratic government made through the centuries, through the country's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because he saw that it meant truth came at the expense of justice. 26 years on, not only have we failed to prosecute those who blatantly refuse to prosecute the bargain, but the promised truth reconciliation is wearing thin, he said to Al Jazeera. Gevers points to the fact that the crime of apartheid has never been prosecuted in South Africa or anywhere else in the world. De Klerk's comment came at a particularly difficult time for South Africa, as Nobel laureate and former Archbishop of Cape Town, Desmond Tutu, said in his foundation's statement on February 16th, South Africa is on an economic precipice. It is bested by radical poverty and inequity. Those who suffered most under apartheid continue to suffer most today. February was not the first time de Klerk was criticized for his public statements on apartheid. He initially apologized for apartheid on April 29th, 1993. That apology was widely regarded as inadequate since it did not disclose de Klerk's personal participation in the apartheid crimes. Subsequently, during his testimony to the TRC in 1997, de Klerk described his initial apology as an unqualified apology. He pushed back against those who attacked it as an attempt to defend or justify the policies of the past. Leon Wessels, a cabinet minister during de Klerk's presidency, told Al Jazeera the de Klerk that appeared before the TRC was a jurist and an intellectual. De Klerk did not seem to be emotionally present. Veteran journalist Max Dupraise found it particularly disappointing that de Klerk never asked for forgiveness before the TRC. Political commentator and academic William Gumede believed one reason for the strong outcry after de Klerk's February statement is the optimism of the populist left, represented by the EFF. He said the current climate is particularly inflammable. Like Tutu, Gumede also believes the difficult economic situation means poor South Africans are particularly disgruntled. White denial. Christy van der Wesselhuizen, an associate professor at the Center for Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University, believes the recent outcry is indicative of a reaction to the hardening of white attitudes in recent years. These attitudes can, in turn, be relayed to the ANC's government's lost decade due to grand-scale corruption, she said. She believes the denial of the severity of apartheid constitutes apartheid denial. There is an obfuscation of the dehumanization of marginalized groupings under apartheid, she said. Journalist Stam told Al Jazeera the outcry this year is because there is much unfinished business and there will never be resolution. Enough evidence emerged at the TRC of the murder of the savagery and the savagery of the apartheid state. Stam believes de Klerk's denial was indicative of a more general unwillingness on the part of the white South Africans to recognize the severity of apartheid. The history in its fullness has not yet been told. And the damage wreaked on the lives of millions of South Africans over a sustained period of time to be disposed to be rendered a nothing legally, and the ramifications of this ramifications of this on generations is still here with us, she said. 2 weeks after de Klerk said apartheid was not a crime against humanity, he retracted his statement after Tutu asked him to. Speaking through his foundation on February 17th, de Klerk declared apartheid totally unacceptable and conceded that the United Nations had previously highlighted that the error was indeed a humanitarian offense. He said he was sorry for causing confusion, anger, and hurt with his words.
So it was a humanitarian offense. However, it was still not deemed a crime against humanity.
Well, he didn't deem it as a crime against humanity. You have to remember, if he uses that legal,
exactly. If he uses that term, that's why I said, oh, interesting. So we called it a what was that term? He said a what was that term you just used?
Humanitarian offense.
That's a creative use of words,
well,
right?
Yeah.
Crimes against humanity means your ass is going to the freaking Hague, bro.
Yeah, but what would you call that term that he just used? I would say that's a creative alternative for saying crime against humanity without saying crime against humanity, because it would incriminate your ass.
That's exactly right. It is a crime against humanity, but it's a term that softens that, so at least you don't start to bring up, because when you talk about crimes against humanity, you start looking at Holocaust and all this kind of stuff.
You're looking at the legal context at that point. If
Milosevic and these guys, Cheney, Bush and all that. Yeah, these dudes, these are crimes against humanity. These guys they would be considered criminals, man.
Well, but Nagon. I mean, however deplorable, we can't use that term.
Yeah. I mean, they're trying to play that because they will implicate themselves as these types of people.
You're forgetting something. Milosevic, all those guys, Hitler and all those guys, you forget those crimes were against who? People of the same complexion.
Well, yeah, those crimes
it cannot
be
considered. It can't be considered legal. It can't be considered legally a crime because if
it's against color folks.
Exactly. That's the first thing.
Yeah,
and
legal
the
works
next
out.
thing is, if he admitted that it is a crime, you're gonna get people upset in Israel and America, because the same thing is going on in America. It hasn't changed. So you can get ADOS people bringing this.
It's going on in Israel. It's going on in Israel too. Going over there as well.
Bringing this to the International Criminal Court and say, hey, look at these crimes. The police are shooting us without just cause. Government not doing anything about it. Government had a hand in training the police how to do these things.
Well, Ariel Sharon, Sharon couldn't leave Israel. He was considered a war criminal. He couldn't leave.
But what I'm saying is that if he admitted that this is a thing, it is going to set a precedent, because none of them have ever admitted that crimes against black people.
No, they're not going to admit that. That's what complexes
are legal. You understand?
They
might be moral. It might be moral. They would admit it to be immoral. But nobody so far has admitted that it's legal.
They're not going to call it a crime, because if you start calling it a crime against humanity, then what? Then what are we dealing with?
ICC
criminal charge.
Yep.
Yeah, there ain't no way they're gonna call it a crime. No chance. And D's right. Against black people.
Wesley. Yeah, go ahead, Wesley.
No, I was just adding a comment. Like, if I'm pretty sure the ICC would have to get involved if it's considered a humanitarian crime.
They don't need to actually get the ICC involved. They have the ACC, the African Criminal Court.
They have their own institutions. Nice.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they do have an ACC. Let me look it up.
I do have an off-topic question though.
Go ahead.
It's geopolitical related.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think with the intergenerational shift happening in government that's going to happen between baby boomers and maybe some Gen X and millennials coming into power? What do you think the geopolitical viewpoint in the United States, how would it change? In my opinion, like the issues of the Middle East would automatically go away because I myself am a Gen Z individual. No one in my age group really cares that much about the Middle East in terms of protecting Saudi Arabia and Israel against Iranian aggression, so-called Iranian aggression.
Well, to kind of answer that question, I mean, it's really not gonna. I mean, they kind of don't take this any kind of way. You are actually kind of primed and prepped not to give a shit because at this particular point in time, the interest of the corporate U.S. corporate infrastructure here is to largely maximize on technology at this stage, right? You see, so they don't really, right. They've kind of marginalized you as any sort of like human capital or resource option at this point. They're really now looking to leverage all of the technologies that we talk about here on a consistent basis. So with your constituency, you've kind of been left and with the task of demanding of the government things like universal health care, UBI, things of that sort, so that the government can accommodate the populace, right? Because on the other side of things, the corporations have been accommodated in the sense of being, you know, pretty much the regulation being rolled out to allow them to go ahead and continue on business as usual without you.
The game is the name of the game is it's business as usual. Zers and the X's are coming in. Your class really is coming in here. I've said it many times here on the Brain Trust, but you're more like the new serfs of the new age, and your job is to try to get as much, you know, kind of services as you can get out of here. You're not going to be worried about anything else overseas or anything else like that. It's business as usual. Guys are not going to make any changes. That's how it's going to go. In fact, shit may even get worse. So, that's generally how I see it.
Yeah, and let me follow up on that. That's not to paint like because again, man, I hate that we get tagged as doomers and gloomers. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you the like most realistic picture possible, right? Because everything that we talk about, everything that we cover, everything that you actually see going on outside right now, okay, is reflective of what we're saying. Okay, so you have to really sort of put your feelings aside and really just kind of take a pragmatic view at all of this, right? So just because our corporate infrastructure looks to do this in order to maximize on its fiduciary obligations to its shareholders, that does not mean that you don't have the ability to then get out here and engage in the things that technology now affords you to do. Right now, we can go global with enterprises. We talk about these things so much that we really try to pound it in that like, look, you have to really kind of look at this as a complete reset. So it's not just a reset from the standpoint of, oh, okay, so, so the corporations get this and then I don't have a job and then now what? It's like, well, it's a reset in the sense of we're going to be fundamentally just changing how we do things. So we can change that. We can change.
There's one other piece that I think got to be interjected in. Many of the millennials and the Zers, especially coming up, but many of the millennials so far, and young millennials too, and the Zers who are coming up, you guys have not maximized with all this information that's out. You haven't maximized on it. Many youngsters, and I see here in the manosphere and so forth, many of these young guys are ignorant as fuck. Ignorant. They sound like half of them got lead poisoning or some shit, and these guys are dumb as fuck. They're not studying. They're not looking at anything. They're not reading. With all this information, they're not taking a lot of this stuff into to help to make any real fundamental change on some real levels. They're not involved in politics the way they need. You know, all these serious issues as far as education and so forth that's hitting them, these who are getting adversely affected. These guys are not really putting themselves in a position to move to shake some of this shit up. You guys should damn near be ready to push some of this shit damn near to revolution with a lot of information that's out here.
I'm going to tell you that we will not be that generation to do that.
And it's not, guys are just, you just ain't on top of it. I see some of the conversations that we have here. I'm even seeing here in Manosphere, young brothers and stuff, fucking out of it, lost, gone. You know, guys are. It's like they grew up eating lead all most of their life. They're eating paint chips. They're dumb as fuck. They're stupid as fuck. And I know, you know, we can talk mama generation and all that, but these guys people are not aggregating a lot of key critical information. And you get mad at the older guys who sit here and come down on you about that. But this is something that you should be picking up a lot more on. And this is a generation that has come up with more information than any other generation in the history of our species. And this is what a lot of guys are doing. And it's to me, when I look at this, especially, I find it frightening.
Look, for me, is when I hear this generation talk, it's like, what has the past generation done for me? And none of the past generations, especially the people, when let's take for instance the Gen Xers, when they came of age, they say, you know what, I'm going out and get myself education and a job. A lot of us got this foolish education, but we still got education and a job. All the things that you see created today, the cell phone and etc., came from that generation. But you hear this generation saying, what have you done for me? You know what I'm saying? Instead of looking for how to build their own or build on what they have, they are into using what they have. When I say using what they have, they use the cell phone, you know, but for what? And that cell phone, I hear people say the cell phone in their hand has more processing power than was available when they put a rocket into space. But these guys are not using it. I always cry with my kids. I said, man, you got everything in your palm of your hand. You say, what? That cell phone. Guess what they use it for? Texting. You know what I'm saying? Looking at girls online. The women look at dresses. They chat with one another. And what else are you doing with it? You know? So you as a generation gonna have to start building something. And if you wait until my generation passed, you don't learn anything, it's the doom of America. Well, the rest of the world. Well, I shouldn't say that. Doom of America, because the Africans of your generation are just starting to stand up. If you look at the news and what they are doing, young Africans are doing, they're running past you by the droves.
All right, I need to jump to the next item on the docket from foreignpolicy.com. Russia fires shot in space arms race. Russia tested a missile on Wednesday that is capable of destroying satellites in low Earth orbit, U.S. Space Command said in a statement, as the Pentagon faced military challenges from Russia, China, and Iran over the course of a busy day. The move could be a significant challenge to U.S. efforts to invest in communication satellites and sensor layers to track missiles in flight, as the Space Force did during Iran's ballistic missile attack on Iraq's Al-Assad air base in January, which left more than 100 U.S. troops with traumatic brain injuries. Really? This test is further proof of Russia's hypocritical advocacy of outer space arms control proposals designed to restrict the capabilities of the United States while clearly having no intention of halting their counter space weapons programs. The missile test is another example of Russian forces challenging the United States in outer space in recent months, as the Trump administration has sought to get the nascent U.S. Space Force off the ground. Time reported in February that 2 Russian satellites had begun shadowing a U.S. satellite in outer space, a move that Raymond said had the potential to create a dangerous situation. It won't just be Russia keeping the nascent Space Force busy. The Secure World Foundation said in its annual report last month that China, Iran, and North Korea are also looking at counter space technologies. Interesting.
Hey, Mike, you remember that article that you had the other day that said so the U.S. is now putting its satellites 2,400 kilometers out?
Yeah.
Specifically because of this foolishness.
Well, space is pretty crowded at this point. Don't forget France is up there. India shot down a satellite last year and created all these fragments in space, all this debris. Had the space shuttle, the International Space Station concerned. Just about every country that can get into space has satellite killing capabilities.
Right. That's what the U.S. is putting in its satellite. The thing that used to hold us back was the communication, the time. The further you put you out, the less the speed of the communication slows down. That time was essence, but now they're learning how to go around that and speed up that communication so they can put it further out.
Yeah. Why is it even called fifth generation? Pentagon's decision not to fix supersonic speed issue with F-35C defeat jet's very purpose. This is from RT.com. A U.S. decision to limit the F-30C's supersonic flight capabilities instead of fixing an issue that increases the risk of tail damage will put a strain on pilots and deal a huge blow to the fighter's combat power, analysts warn. The F-35 Joint Program Office, JPO, a Pentagon agency responsible for developing and acquiring the F-35 fighter jets, recently revealed that a specific construction issue caused damage to the Navy F-35C jet's tail section. If it flies at supersonic speed for a long time, however, it's said that this was not worth fixing, mostly due to the high projected cost of a revamp. Instead, the JPO said the jet's very capability to fly at such speeds would be reduced to short bursts. The US media already noted that such changes would severely limit the F-35C's ability to intercept airborne targets, something for which a fighter jet is specifically designed. In addition, it is also expected to negatively affect its maneuverability in the event that it needs to avoid a missile or survive a dogfight. The decision appears to be less than optimal, particularly because it defeats the purpose of the much-hyped fifth-generation aircraft in general. Although Lockheed Martin, a company that developed and produced F-35 jets, tend to focus on stealth and electronics when defining its idea of such an aircraft. It still says that it should be capable of extreme performance. That is what the Navy version of the F-35 will now apparently be lacking. Russian Air Force Major Andrei Kraspinov, a flight instructor and a jet aerobatic specialist, sees a limited supersonic flight capability as the most serious deficiency for a fifth-generation aircraft. Why do they even say it is a 5th generation jet? It should fly 2 or 3 times faster than the speed of sound. At that point, it's only a 3rd generation jet. Apart from that, the decision not to fix the tail issue would only put additional physiological or psychological strain on the pilots. In a real combat situation, the pilot should not have to think about risk of damage to his jet's tail if he somehow flies with an afterburner on for too long. Such construction deficiency would still seriously affect pilot safety. Fabrizio Poli, an independent aviation consultant and CEO of the Orville Aviation, an aircraft sales, private jet management, and aviation consultancy company, also believes that the limitation of the supersonic flight would eventually make the jet less versatile, affecting its combat capabilities. He also compared the fallout from the decision with the Boeing 737 MAX scandal that rocked the U.S. civil aviation industry in 2019 and early 2020. What are you
looking for?
A particular issue arising from
a car or house?
A particular issue arising from the decision to tie the F-35C supersonic flight to the afterburner is that it might hurt the jet's stealth capabilities, another much hyped feature of the aircraft, said Vladimir Korzunov, an aviation expert with avia.ru. Even a short supersonic afterburner burst makes it an easy target due to a powerful jet exhaust, Karnazov explained. He also noted, though, that even fighter jets capable of moving at supersonic speed without engaging the afterburners are still much easier to detect than aircraft moving at subsonic velocity. So what it seems like to me here is that they might as well scrap this plane. What's the point in having a plane that costs $200+ million not have all of its capabilities in the time of need? You're better off maybe with the F-22, I guess.
The F-22 is a fucking big turkey as well. I don't know, man. The United States, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what. Whoever's at the wheel, man, is either they're smoking too much ganja, or they're doing something that's got their fucking minds twisted, because these guys ain't thinking clearly. I don't know what kind of drugs they're on, but they're on something that's got their minds ain't right. I don't know what this shit's about.
Damn sure ain't no ganja, I'll tell you that much.
Anybody say F-15?
F-15, yeah, the F-15 Super Eagle. I'll go with that. I'll go with that old bit.
But funny, how this airplane went through so much testing, and they never. I mean, one of the things that you got to test is that afterburner and the airframe. Mm-hmm. Serious, because that thing will tear the engine out of an airframe.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys listen to an afterburner. On takeoff.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it shakes. It shakes that airplane. If you sit, well, not that I've never sat in that airplane, but sitting on the F-15 or even an F-4 and just do a 10-second, 30-second blast on afterburner, you will feel it, bro. I mean,
you burn up a mad amount of fuel on that, but
that rattle, but the rattle on the airframe, you feel it.
Yeah. And basically at that point in time, you're sitting on top of a rocket. You are actually sitting in the cockpit on top of a freaking rocket at that moment.
Yeah, you
but
are.
What these guys are, I don't know what's going on. I know they got the this aircraft that replaced the SR-71. the Aurora and all that, which is supposed to be something outrageous, which I can certainly understand. But this stuff, these guys are producing. I don't know. I don't know what these dudes are. I don't know what they're thinking, man.
But the DE's point that the fact that the frame is rattling around like that means that thing is not really good because
it's not structurally sound.
In Syria, they flew the F-35 over there, and they said that Israel had to bring it back down because it had problems with it.
Yeah, man. Supposed to, and they're saying, well, it's got vectored thrust technology and all that. They're doing all this crap, and this shit ain't working, man. Like I said, the Russians have been ahead of us in this aircraft game, man, for a good 30 years. They've been ahead of us, man. I hate to say it. I mean, Soviet Union went down, and I know they're back into the game again. And the Sukhoi 37 and all that, doing Cobra maneuvers and spinning all around and crazy vector thrust technology. That these planes can fly circles around what we have. For our basic forces, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. I don't know what you guys are thinking.
The question I'm asking myself now is, why did the Russians come out and say this in the open? Normally they talk about it in the background, they'd be laughing and making fun about it, jokes about it. But in the open like this is like, something must be happening.
They just launched the Su-57. It was only last week we covered it, right? And they've been doing test flights in Syria for the last few years during the Syrian conflict. In fact, and we covered that before, that the Su-57 was going through beta tests in Syria and actually flew with flying colors according to the Russians. So, it hit all its targets and did what it was supposed to do without fail. I don't know. The Su-57 is now being looked at as a better plane. So yeah, Russian mechanics and stuff like that got to come out and say, yeah, this is a piece of crap.
Yeah, I mean, but like I said, the 37 that they had came out was I thought trumped everything. I thought that everything we had, basically, everything, and made the 22, the F-22 look like the big giant turkey that it is. I mean, that's what I think. They've been spanking us for a while. When the Foxbat came out, we came out with the Foxbat killer, with the F-15, and I think that's about the best we've done. I don't think out of real, what I would say air superiority aircraft that really, in the combat, in the combat zone, I think that was the best we have. I know we got this Aurora, which is more like the SR-71, which is not only a spy plane, but it can do some very interesting things. I think from a warfare perspective, as far as almost a fighter jet, but that's not really a plane you're going to employ a lot. We don't have a lot of those, but for just a air combat fighter, if you will, and a fighter bomber, if you will. That you can employ a lot of. I think the Russians got us beat, man. I think they've had us beat for a while. Yeah. Yeah, they've had us beat for a while. Mike, as far as this 57 was concerned, what were some of its more extraordinary features? I mean, you don't need to run down this as of right now, but what made that? What continued their that superior profile that they have? What was on that?
It basically can do a vertical climb.
Yeah.
From the ground. As soon as it takes off, it can go straight up into a vertical.
You talking about nose up, tail back?
Yeah, nose up, tail back. I don't know the term that they use. DE probably knows the term.
They call it unity. So it could achieve unity like that. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I don't know if the F-22 can really do that.
No, but they said that this plane, I don't know the term of it, but basically it can go dead and then recover itself in mid-flight, and then and still fire off missiles all in one swoop. They showed that happening last year. So
So mid-air recovery, so it can recover, so it can recover from a dead, basically from a dead stop, it can recover. All right.
Yeah, I saw a video on YouTube of it doing it. I mean, it didn't stall. The aircraft didn't stall. And normally when you come to it, it doesn't stall and fall backwards.
We don't have anything like that. We don't have anything like that.
It was weird looking at that, because normally you get to a point where you stall. You have to put that nose over or you stall.
We don't have anything like that. We just don't. We don't. It's just pitiful. But anyway, with all this money, all this cash we're spending, and we got a bunch of Ruskies out here waxing us in the skies, and they've been doing that for about the last 30, almost 40 years. It's a joke. Joke. Anyway, I'm done.
You there, Mike? Hello, anybody there?
Is Mike there?
Yeah,
Or did the
Russians? I don't know if he's muted.
Or did the Russians get him?
Oh, he's muted. Oh, he's unmuted now.
No, I had to get some water, man.
Bolsheviks got their foot on his neck.
Paul Ryan.
All right, last item on the docket is from foreignpolicy.com. The next pandemic might not be natural. Oh man, this is gonna be a doozy. Was a new coronavirus cooked up in a lab? That's the current conspiracy theory spreading across the globe, from Iran to Russia to the United States. Conspiracy theorists and scheming political operatives are making wild accusations with absolutely no evidence to back them up. Whether they blame Chinese researchers or the US military, at present, all the data suggests that this virus, which has sickened more than 2.4 million people, killed over 167,000, devastated the entire world economy, and pulled off a trick the Soviet Navy only dreamt of by neutralizing a US nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, originated in the natural world. But what if the next one doesn't? Germs have killed more people than all wars in history. And people have been trying to make use of them throughout all of those wars. Even before humans knew about the existence of microbes, they fumbled about with infected arrowheads, catapulted plague corps, and most infamously, dispatched smallpox soaked blankets. While the scientific revolution helped humans battle those horrible diseases, it also helped them inflict those diseases on each other. From the World War I German experiments with infecting allied livestock to the massive and largely forgotten in the West, Japanese germ attacks on China, which may have caused upwards of 200,000 deaths. In World War II, to the colossal bioweapon stockpiles of the Cold War, which at least in one case caused a Soviet anthrax version of Chernobyl. On a smaller scale, we've seen bioterrorist attacks in the United States, such as the Argency poisoning of restaurants in 1986 and the anthrax letters that were mailed in 2001 to specific targets around the country. Fear of Saddam Hussein's supposed stocks of biological weapons was one of the main causes of the disastrous Iraq War. One of the many casualties of that debacle was the public belief in biodefense, crying wolf, as the George W. Bush administration did with then Secretary of State Colin Powell's famous vial of anthrax speech, boomerang back in America's face. The nation became convinced that just because Saddam didn't have biological weapons, no one else could either. After the Iraq War, Americans went from irrational paranoia to irrational denial. the years running up to the current coronavirus pandemic not only saw the gutting of U.S. national health institutions, but also a cultural groundswell of science denial in the anti-vaccination movement. Today, the United States in particular is paying for that denial in livelihoods and lives. The warnings were clear. The danger was real. And instead of using the precious calm before the biostorm to prepare for a vulnerable population, U.S. President Donald Trump not only responded with feckless token gestures, but made a very public point of downplaying the threat of the virus as a hoax. How much damage could have been prevented had the world's richest, most powerful nation behaved differently? How many lives could have been saved? If 9/11 was a failure of imagination, then history will no doubt judge the Trump administration's response to COVID-19 as a failure of courage, compassion, and most of all, competence. And if the next administration doesn't reverse course and fast the next pandemic, whether naturally occurring or the result of genuine attack, could make this one look like the seasonal sniffles. Right now, as the world struggles with a naturally occurring bug, there are still massive germ warfare stocks all around the globe. Even if we could trust that the Russians abided by the Biological Weapons Convention of 1972 and destroyed their arsenals. What about China or North Korea, which never ratified the treaty? And these are just the nation states. What about the terrorist groups, the non-state actors with no land to defend and nothing to lose? In the last century, the renowned Ebola fighter Carl Johnson warned, it's only a matter of months, years at most, before people nail down the genes for virulence and airborne transmission, and influenza, Ebola, Lassa, you name it. And then any crackpot with a few $1,000s worth of equipment in a college of biology education under his belt could manufacture bugs that could make Ebola look like a walk in the park. Now, Johnson's prediction is right around the corner. With a little dark web information and some secondhand lab equipment, anyone will soon be able to generate do-it-yourself blights in a basement lab and then release them back into the general population. Genetic manipulation is the most dangerous threat humanity has ever faced because it allows anyone to spin straw into lethal gold. Unlike the hypothetical nuclear terrorists whom we've spent untold fortunes preparing for, but who can't act without acquiring precious, rare, and heavily guarded fissile material, the biohacker will be able to harvest germs from anywhere. And unlike the nuclear terrorist who gets only one shot at destruction, the biohacker's bomb can copy itself over and over again. Obviously, there is no perfect defense against the germ of the future. The fact that a lone actor could create designer bugs ensure that there will be no ready-made vaccine. But increased surveillance, a robust public health infrastructure, and most importantly, a willingness on the part of the public to believe in frontline experts will be crucial in minimizing the damage done by a yet to be created bioweapon. But yet as we're seeing now with the coronavirus, whether born from a malice or chance, the invisible enemy can hide within our ranks, multiplying in secret, planting time bombs in our bodies, and all before we know what's hit us. Ultimately, humanity might not end with a bang, but with a feeble cough. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. The world can stop it, and nobody has to develop a whole new weapon system to do it. Unlike all other means of war, where new inventions require counter inventions for protection, from bulletproof vests to anti-tank missiles, all we have to do is change our thinking. All we have to do is see our public health as national security. And we used to be really good at it. Since the 1918 influenza pandemic, humanity, particularly in the developed world, has been building networks of public health systems to detect and defend us against disease. Only recently have we allowed those networks to deteriorate, putting hucksters in charge and valuing false savings over investment in our own system. The United States in particular needs to reverse the trend. It needs to start pouring the kind of money and attention into systems like the global surveillance that it does for the F-35 jet fighter. Americans need to pay more attention to organizations like the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense that have worked tirelessly to try to warn of the threat of germ warfare. And instead of breaking ties with them in a fit of presidential pique, the United States needs to strengthen its cooperation with global health networks like the World Health Organization to reclaim leadership in the fight against microbes. And because public health and national security are one, the United States needs to incorporate the massive might of its military. Service members have already trained for disaster situations. They are already included in the master disaster plan of the National Response Framework. And when they've been able to fight side by side with the public health professionals, as in the 2014 Operation United Assistance against Ebola, they have showed the power of defeating an enemy abroad instead of waiting for it at home. Lastly, Americans who see the danger need to re-engage the public in the fight against microscopic threats. No free and open democracy can survive without the willing support of its people. If there is any sliver of good from this tragedy, it might be the wake-up call that public health is not something to take for granted. Those in power and fighting the war on microbes need to partner with storytellers and communicators around the world the same way Hollywood went to war in 1941. The average voter or taxpayer has to be reintroduced to science and facts to understand where sickness comes from and how to effectively combat it. So I think this is pretty good. Pretty good breakdown and summary.
It's kind of showing you that these microbes are like nukes. They can drop a nuclear bomb on you without having to have any kind of explosion.
Yeah, it's a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, weapon of mass destruction for sure.
First, he's telling me it's going to happen. And he said, but we can stop it if you allow us the ability to use surveillance. That's it. That's all I'm hearing from this article.
Yeah, you're talking about with the surveillance state and increasing even more of that stuff that they're doing right now. But we've seen with all the surveillance, it hasn't really stopped a lot of terrorist acts. I mean, maybe some wackos, but as far as if somebody really wanted to have a very strong coordinated attack on you, I don't think the surveillance state's going to do much to stop that. So,
it's
and
impossible.
we can see these bio weapons can be a nuke. It can kill you. I mean, we know that the Spanish flu in 1918 killed anywhere between 50 to 100 million people, and that's more than we lost in the First World War, Second World War, and Vietnam and all that combined. So, that flu did that, and it did that right after the First World War, and nobody even talked about it. It's one of the biggest hits we had. A lot of people who died during that period, people who lost parents and so forth. You go, oh, my father died, some of these old people say, oh, I had a parent who died or whatever. A lot of these people died of the flu. They didn't tell you that. So, big hidden secret, that was wide open that we haven't spoken about. So the ignorance on that, this is something that we should have really been a lot more aware of. And, I was aware of it. A lot of us were aware of it, but not to the level that we should have been. And here we are again. So we can see that bioweapons or any kind of biological or, flu attack or something else like that can wipe out large sections of a population in a very short period of time without destroying one building or tearing up any infrastructure at all.
Well, it's you allow that kind of surveillance, then I mean anybody can get arrested for anything at all.
Yeah, but you know that's just to control people and control how you think, control what you buy. You know, control the corporate. I saw Snowden going into some really great detail on that. He broke that down, but all of that is not going to stop something like this. So, you know, so you see the weakness in that as well. So.
If we continue the way we're going, the days of the all great power like the China, U.S., like in the past with Great Britain, those days are over. Serious, unless they can put, because one individual can destroy the state.
Here's a flu, literally, shutting down most of the world. I mean, so it's just letting you know what's really going on out here and where our priorities and how we should be thinking. How we should be thinking should be, but here we are. Here it is, exposing all this stuff right now. So, different world right now, even though it's changing in front of us. But I don't know how many of us will see that this is a different world today.
Can you imagine an AI in the form of a man? That's a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because that thing is essentially a self-contained army machine. I mean, put two engines on it. There you go, Iron Man or. Oh well, that's the problem.
No, I mean, they have to look at their public health institutions. I mean, they're widely inadequate. From an infrastructure perspective, they are not as ubiquitous as, let's say, your public libraries, for that matter. There should be way more in every single neighborhood in every city. There's just a big civil infrastructure, civil engineering, and digital transformation gap that they dropped the ball with on, and this could have easily been prevented. I mean, we talk about UBI, but the reason why we talk about UBI in this regard is because had they planned this out last year, UBI from last year, you wouldn't have people scrambling, in squalor now. I mean, there are a lot of people who are trapped in their houses, but basically they're being left to die. They wouldn't have to be left to, just drop dead or pass off in their own houses as a crematory, man. Kind of crazy that they just did not plan this out. And you would think, and that's why I'm saying, the United States is not ready for biological warfare. Biological warfare will wipe them out. You wouldn't even have to. This is a good example to their adversaries. If I'm Iran, if I'm North Korea, if I'm any of these countries that has beef with the United States, look how easy it is to bring them to their knees.
Well, I think the only thing about that is this is almost like like they had the mustard gas back during the First World War. You release this stuff, it could come back on you. So you got to be, how are you going to guarantee that doesn't come back and affect you, you and your country? So I think that's the only issue. Can you target something like this to only hit one area and not spread, not get around? Because a more effective virus is not one that kills a lot of people immediately, because you can shut that down quickly, and you can isolate it and shut it down quickly. But something that can get into the population, chill out for a while, slowly start to erode you and just take you out, and then morph, and then mutate, and then become even more deadly second round, and really just start to take you out in some real slow but in a horrifying, inexorable end, that type of thing. Yeah, that's very scary. But but can you directionally focus that to see to it that it goes in one direction, doesn't come back on you? That's another question. And maybe that can be done. I don't know. But one thing I do see is that it shows that the system certainly, as far as America's concerned, we ain't ready. We ain't ready for Freddie, as they say. We ain't ready for something real like this to come down. We're not ready. We're still not. It shows where our priorities are totally wrong, where we are fundamentally fucking up. And, you know, it just shows you, you know, that so much of our game here is way off. It's just off. It's off the mark. And, you know, I think that's the frightening thing, that a lot of people don't want to have to really sit back, reconsider what's really going on, and make the changes that we're going to really need to have to make without radically changing our society and radically changing how we think, you know, and how we're looking at things. Because some of these changes are going to have to be enacted. And that means some people are going to take some serious cuts in their pocketbooks over this. And that's the big issue. You know, that's a problem. We have prioritized them. We have not thought properly. We have not organized our society in a way that is really prepared for anything that's going to help to bring us down or destroy us. We're not prepared. And we're getting ready to walk into a second phase of this disease right now, with opening up the country and all this, just getting ready to tear a lot of us out the frame. And I am quite frankly terrified.
Yeah. Not enough test kits out there, and they want to open up the economy. Good luck.
It's insanity. It's insane. These are the moves we're making. We ain't ready, man. And the thinkers and the shapers of the society are psychopathic, psychotic, sick, fucked up individuals. And yeah, you know, I'd rather have my grandson running this shit than these jokers, for real.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like Hardfort Rich said in the chat, bioweapon mixed with a cyber attack is a wrap. Yeah, of course. You bring down technological infrastructure, even if it's just temporarily, send them in panic or ransomware, and then you inflict it with something like this, man, you turn the United States into a third world country overnight.
See, one of the problems we have is that our healthcare system is solely based on capitalism. How much money you have to make the most money of anything that you do, you produce, that you introduce, that you create. If it is not about making money, we don't care. We don't care about the survival of the country per se, as long as we are making billions of dollars. That's the basis. And when you have that as a basis, you're destroying the country from within.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you can't run it this way. That's why it's showing you that this system we have is not working. We think it's working. It's not. Look at what's going on right now. Over 60,000 deaths. Much of this could have been avoided. Much of this could have been. You got doctors and healthcare workers, nurses and so forth that don't even have enough masks and stuff. I mean, what kind of system are you talking about? I mean, it's an obscenity, man. This shit is obscene. It's actually obscene. System is not working. It's not designed to work. You can't have a healthcare system run strictly on pure capitalism. You can't have it that way. There's a humanitarian aspect to this. You cannot have it that way. You can't. Certain things can be totally run from a capitalistic perspective. You want to sell cars, you know, you want to sell clothes, you know, and the shoes and sneakers. You want to do all that, you can run that. But certain other things, like, you can't run that way. You know, can't do it.
We got
look, even the military, you can see that it's based solely on, you know, the guy is not going to produce a missile unless he can sell it for $1 million.
Yeah, they all have expiration dates on them.
Yeah, exposing the country to, you know, it's amazing. If you're not watching this thing, you would think that you are really protected. You know, the average American walking around feeling safe that, you know what, America, nobody's going to attack America because we will just level them, turn them into a featureless landscape. When that's not fact. You know, this is and he's happy going to work every day, you know. And if you ask him, you know, why don't we have good health care? You know, you're a communist, you're a socialist.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, so socialist is just another term for nigga. So let's go to Renaissance Man and give him the last word.
Hey, what's up, fellas?
What's going on, bro?
No, it's funny you say that. That actually popped in my head about communist. I know the same thing was done in South Africa. Like pretty much any movement that was in opposition, and really that's how any system, especially right wing, that's any old attack that they use is basically, hey, anything that we don't like, that's challenging, that's progressive, they're going to label you a communist. It's been a classic tactic, especially used against Black people in struggles for freedom. So no, it's interesting you say that. No, I was going to ask, I was wondering if you all saw the article where they said Trump was basically having like a Manhattan type project of basically a bunch of people trying to get I think it was a bunch of scientists basically trying to get together and either get a vaccine done by, I believe, the end of the year.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. I saw it come across my phone today, and I was like I said, I talked to a doctor, and I was like, they said there are a couple of sources who are close to it are basically saying that's what they're attempting to do now.
Yeah, my doctor thinks that I talked to him because I'm supposed to see him, but I can't see this guy until maybe June. But he thinks that a vaccine can be found within the next 3 or 4 months. He believes that we're capable able to do it if we have enough people on top of this to do it. He believes that they can, because this virus, you know, we've seen viruses that are close to this, that were close to the one in 1918, and this is and this one is not immensely different. It's different, but it's not immensely different. The big issue of it is the mutability of this thing, how this virus can actually change, and it does change over a fairly quick period of time, and that's what they're concerned about. But they feel that they can put enough people on it. They feel that there's enough information out there to figure out a vaccine on this quickly. So people saying a year and a half, I think those guys are giving you a longer time frame than what you actually might need. He believes that this can be found a lot quicker, and that some people are already on top of this who feel that they're pretty close to something right now. So I don't know what to say. You know, there's a lot of differing information out there, but some of the people in the know feel that this can be, you know, the gap on this can be closed quickly, which I would think as well. But we'll have to see. But we'll see what the financial games behind this. Well, we got to charge XYZ number of people, you know, for this vaccine and all that. You know, they'll try to monetize this thing, man. You know, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just, you know, if you're gonna put some bailout money into this vaccine that you have and get this thing out here quickly and give it to people for nothing, and just, you know, immunize your public. So you can have a country that can go back to work. I don't know.
You know, they were even saying testing, like you need more innovation in testing. Like I believe someone was looking at something like where you can like spit in a tube and like basically test yourself at home. You know, because they're like the current test that they have is just too cumbersome, takes too much time. So
yeah, it's like a test tube big. But no, thing is, I work in big pharma, and I've seen what, you know, we go through our daily hands-on meetings and stuff like that, and I can tell you right now, they're ways off from ever getting put up with a solution. 3 or 4 months, that's a pipe dream.
It very well might be.
The pharmaceutical world, that is a pipe dream.
To judge it.
That is a pipe dream in the pharmaceutical world. They wouldn't even think of something like that in that much time. It takes 3 to 4 months just to get people on deck.
Maybe that's the case. You know, that very well made it. I think what my doctor was saying was, you know, if you had people on this and really working on this thing and going head into it, you could figure this thing out in a fairly short period of time.
You think testing though, right? Phases. A phase, you may have to go through 2, 3, and 4 phases. A phase can last, you know, a season.
It could, but you know, you might have some emergency stuff that can be done quicker. You're right. Mike, I'm not here to argue, even debate the point. I just think that we can come up with something quick, how quick is another question. And they're saying that they have some people right now that were on it. Because when I was looking at this one program, this Dr. Lee, who was out there in he's out there in Seattle, the University of Seattle, and they feel like they're closing in on this sucker already.
Nah.
So I don't know,
What do you
mean, we got such poor information. We got such poor information coming out on this thing here.
Well,
You got,
you're happy.
one person
well,
saying
I'm not. Look at that. You're dancing, laughing, joking.
Yeah, go ahead, Renaissance man.
No, I was going to ask you, Mike. So, what do you think, realistically, in your mind, based on your knowledge of industry, if you do throw? I mean, granted, maybe this is why it's coming out of the Trump administration. I mean, they're not known for being the most accurate and realistic. I mean, the guy was telling people to eat disinfectant the other day. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you guys look at if you go into the New York Times, the headline is basically saying.
This guy.
Go ahead, Wesley.
That's a piece of work.
If you go into the newspapers, the headline, like the rise of the stock market, they say is because of a Gilead Science test trial that so-called test trial they had for the vaccine. So they're pulling out all the stops to make sure they get this vaccine.
Well, it was a treatment, but see, that same company about a week ago reported semi-good results, and the market went up, and then it went back down because they were like, well, it's not as optimistic as we thought. So like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I saw the market up and I'm like, didn't we just do this a week ago? Like,
I can tell you right now, I work for the largest pharmaceutical company in actually the world. And we actually partnered with a second pharmaceutical lab to work on COVID. So what I'm saying here is that stuff doesn't happen, and lightning doesn't get caught in a bottle or something like that. It doesn't really work that fast. It takes a long time for them to actually come up with something. And I think Dr. Phoenix was on maybe about a week or so ago. He talked about that you may not see something until at least a year from now.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I mean, there's some doctors out here who think that. I think, like my doctor, he believes that they have a lot of, that the CDC and some of these guys have some really good information on this, but his view is that they're holding back on some stuff, for whatever reasons. And I don't want to get into this conversation we had, but he feels as though that there's some, that they may actually have a little bit more knowledge on this than what they're saying. That's why the information is so sketchy that they don't want to put out there as of yet. And I have to agree. One thing I agree, and I just talked to him before very briefly, and he agreed that there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of sketchy information out there on this thing to this day, and it's how are we with this thing, and we're acting like we don't know what's going on. This is a little scary, man. We should have some idea, and virology and all this is a big part of the sciences in the in the biological and medical fields, and we're acting like we don't know what the hell this thing is, and I don't know how true that is.
Because it's mutating every so many times.
That's what you're saying. The mutagenic nature. We talked about the RNA type of a virus that it is. It's RNA based, and it's not DNA, and it's RNA based virus, and it has some different issues that make it a lot more mutagenic. So that's an issue, but that's always an issue with RNA based viruses.
So to answer your question, Renaissance man, we're only in phase 1.
Yep.
You need a few more phases to go through before you can actually put something to market. So, a phase can last quite some time, because this stuff is still relatively new. We're only 90 days into it.
Yep.
So, it could be quite a while before we see something. Go ahead.
On top of that, I was going to say too, even if you get it, bringing it to scale and actually distributing it, I figure
exactly
that's going to be a task in and of itself of, okay, I found it. How do I go mass produce it? And, how many people do I need to give it to? 10, 12, 30% of the population? What?
Yeah. I mean, it is. And what about the antibodies? As long as we can get the proper antibodies around and people have it, we can kind of work with that as well. So we've got to really see, how that's working. So, I mean, this thing really comes down to testing, I think, more so than anything else. In order for us to really get a handle on this, we have to test and see, and be able to see who's got it, who doesn't, those who have it, quarantine, those who don't can get out there and kind of move around and really kind of start to, close in on this thing. And we're nowhere even near that. So, and we're getting ready to open the country up without any of this being done. It's madness.
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be a faster way to test people. I know South Africans came up with a way of doing it in 65 minutes. You need something that's going to do it in 30 seconds, if not less.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to really get some results. I mean, 65 minutes is pretty good, but the ability.
65 minutes is really good right now. That's great.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 65 minutes is really good, but you need to do something that's going to do it in 30 seconds. You need results really quick.
Immediate results.
My aunt was saying, she works in the hospital, and she was saying what ended up happening is one girl got it, and then her mother and her sister ended up getting it as well too. And she was just saying, once you find out that one person gets it, you have to track who they've been in contact with, because they're at risk.
Yeah. I saw a lot of homeless people today, man, just walking around, man, out there, methadone miles, shooting, still shooting needles out in public and stuff like that, man. And they're in close cohabitation with each other under bridges and whatnot. And then they walk into these stores, Now today, this is the first time I've seen that nobody's letting you come inside this store without a mask. So what I'm saying here is those people are most susceptible to it, man, because one, they haven't seen the doctor in God knows how long, and two, nobody knows what they have currently. So if they have pre-existing conditions, they get hit with it, and then they walk into a store, they cough on somebody or something like that, or even just coughing just in the air. Everybody else is at risk at that point. I mean, and how do you track who they've been in contact with since they frequent so many different people? This is a disaster. Absolute.
It's a disaster zone. I mean, we don't know who has it, and the only way you're going to start finding out is just a lot more people are just going to get sick. And I was thinking about LA. I didn't know if
questions in here.
You there, Nagone?
Yeah, I think Nagone dropped off.
Oh, he dropped off. Okay. You got shanty towns down there, and you got all these people. Many of them black men. Just untested, walking around. You've got a homeless population here in New York. Same deal. How are we measuring that? I mean, it's just too many, just incredible variables out here right now that we need to shut down.
In North Korea, they don't have homeless people. Everybody's saying, "Where's Kim? Where's the leader of North Korea? Where's Kim at?" Kim's in isolation, just like every other leader of their country's in isolation. Putin is in some kind of barrack somewhere. He hasn't come out either. He's not going to lift the ban until May 11th. So, and that's just his estimate. Everybody's in isolation. So, I just wanted to make sure we brought up Kim because, people are going to be asked, how come we didn't cover Kim? Well, Kim's in a resort in North Korea. So, he's chilling, man. He's hiding out. So, he's hiding out.
He's hiding out.
How about the North Korean people?
Huh?
How about the North Korean people?
Say that again. We can't hear you.
How about the North Korean people? I was just making a joke.
Oh, yeah. Amazingly enough, they have very few deaths. But that's because they keep. If you look at their city, man, I mean, the way they rebuilt it, man, it's clean. It's not a place of a slum or anything like that. It's just clean. So what I'm saying is,
Pyongyang.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's few people. You don't really have a lot of people trekking around there either.
No.
So it's not like downtown Manhattan. It's not like Midtown or by 40 Deuce or anything like that. It's not like that at all.
No. What I'm saying
play.
What I'm saying is the way their society is structured. they would have few infections anyways. You would think somebody like Trump would say, hey, you know, North Korea, we'll pitch you a few $1,000,000 if you can produce some masks for us. You know, it's a good political win for Trump. You know, and for whatever reason, these guys don't think on that scale. North Korea has a lot of manufacturing capacity that is underutilized, severely underutilized. You know, they're just not utilizing it because they can't export anything. What are you going to do with it?
I was gonna.
Imagine if they produce masks and ventilators and stuff like that. That would be a huge win for both Trump and North Korea.
Yeah.
Would you want to use a North Korea ventilator though?
That's funny. I don't necessarily think that these guys are as pernicious as a lot of people think. They really want to get into the economic game. That's why they built all these cities and all that. They want to be very much like South Korea. You know, they definitely want to get into the economic unions, man. They desperately need that. They've got infrastructure that they set up in their country that's perfect for this. So they want to get it. They definitely want to get in. They definitely want to get in the game. But they're hampered.
When he went to the Hanoi summit to meet Trump, he left when he was leaving the Hanoi summit. He said, that we want North. He said Vietnam is an example of what we want North Korea to be. So he had some time to look around and actually examine the environment and say, you know, the communist structure inside Vietnam, and the little market-based economy that's on the ground is exactly what we want.
Yep. You know, and they're running it. I mean, just, you know, and Vietnam, everybody who I know who's been there, who's been over there, you got quite a few Americans who've gone over there to work as well. They love what's going on. It's just a great place.
No,
so,
Vietnam is the hottest place for investment of 2019.
Well, yeah, it's a great place right now, and you know you don't hear a lot about it, but it is. So you know, there's North Korea, if they ever get assembled into the game, they'll do well economically. I know China will have some issues with that because they may not want another strong, powerful kind of competitor, just below them. But that looks like that's something inevitably that's going to happen.
They may not have any choice at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Since economically they're going to go through a bubble, either next year or the year after, because they produce many goods, and it's not with COVID. Where are you going to sell all that stuff? And if you're going to sell, you're going to sell it at a fraction of the cost. Mostly because people don't need to buy it. And the United States is the #1 partner to China in terms of economic growth. And so if people in the United States aren't buying goods like that, you're gonna have you produced all these goods, you're gonna run into a bubble. It's inevitable.
Yeah, you definitely are, and that's why China, I think, in the beginning was really trying to keep this thing low, quiet, because they didn't want a lot of this getting out because they knew what the effects that it was going to have on their economic outlook, and just not now, but down the line, and it's going to be significant. So yeah. But anyway, let's strap in, man, because this is going to be a bumpy ride for a bit.
Yeah. I was going to ask with the Vietnam thing, quick, before you close. Now, isn't that where a lot of manufacturing from China is shifting?
Yes.
You definitely have a lot of that going on. Absolutely.
It's already maxed out. It's already maxed out because they only have so much capacity.
Okay, that's what I thought. I'd heard that, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. That's why I said North Korea would be a right place to produce masks and ventilators and shit like that.
Yep.
It'd be crazy for Trump not to pitch that, to undermine China, to do business with North Korea, to produce masks and get North Korea working and put a few $1,000,000 into their few shekels into their coffers. That's a big geopolitical win for both sides. I mean, Trump comes out, with a good foreign policy objective, takes the heat off the United States, puts North Koreans to work and produces shit that they greatly needed. They greatly need to get their people working, right? And so now you create this this economic relationship that no other president had done prior to him. So the same way Nixon went to China, this could be Trump's going to Pyongyang. So I don't know, man. I don't know, man. I don't know what they're thinking.
He's not capable of thinking on.
No, I'm saying even his whole cabinet. Well, I don't know what they're thinking, man. They just have a lot of because South Korea sent a whole lot of goods to them, PPE stuff to the United States. So I'm saying North Korea could have done the same exact thing if he was thinking on that level to undermine China and say China bad and North Korea is now good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Shalom, everyone.